worst kind of pain is caring deeply and watching it backfire, not because you expect anything in return, but because caring is just who you are. You show up without being asked. You check in on people who never think to check on you. You stay up late listening to problems that were never yours to carry. You give your time, your energy, your patience, not to be praised, just because you care, and somehow that becomes the thing that hurts you. Because some people don't meet kindness with care. They get comfortable with it. They start expecting it. They stop noticing it. Your effort becomes routine. Your consistency becomes invisible until one day you don't show up the same way anymore. That's when they finally notice. That's when they ask what's wrong. But by then you're already tired of explaining your intentions, tired of proving your heart, tired of giving pieces of yourself to people who never stay long enough to understand what it costs you. It's not that you regret caring, you just wish having a good heart didn't hurt this much. And maybe the hardest truth is realizing that loving deeply doesn't guarantee you'll be loved the same way. But that doesn't make your softness a weakness. It just means it needs protection. Don't stop caring. Just be careful who you hand that kind of love to. When you're the one who cares deeply, you usually become not the reliable one, the one people vent to, the one people lean on, the one who always answers. You're dependable in ways people don't even notice anymore. They assume you'll be there, assume you'll understand, assume you'll forgive, so they stop asking how you are, not out of cruelty, but because consistency gets mistaken for endless capacity. You start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Other people's stress, other people's problems, other people's moods, and you hold it all quietly because you don't want to be a burden the way you never see them as one. But over time, something shifts. You feel tired in a deeper way, not just physically, emotionally. You notice how rarely someone shows up for you the way you show up for them, how quickly your needs get overlooked, how easily your exhaustion goes unseen. And that's when it starts to hurt differently, because you didn't ask for much, you just wanted effort to meet effort, care to meet care, but instead you became the place people take from without realizing they're draining you, and slowly being the strong one starts to feel like being the forgotten one. Eventually something changes, not in a dramatic way. You don't announce it, you don't make a scene, you just stop giving the same way you used to. You reply a little later, you don't over-explain anymore. You stop stretching yourself thin just to be available, and that's when people notice. Not when you were exhausted, not when you were drained, not when you were giving everything. They notice when you pull back. Suddenly they ask what's wrong, suddenly they feel the distance, suddenly they miss the version of you that was always there. And that part hurts, because it shows you something you didn't want to see. They didn't miss you. They missed the access. They missed the comfort you provided, the effort you gave without question, the way you made things easier for them. So when you stop showing up like that, it feels personal to them. But for you, it wasn't about punishment, it was about survival. You didn't stop caring. You just stop bleeding quietly, and realizing that is both painful and freeing, because it teaches you this: anyone who only notices your absence was never really paying attention to your presence. When you finally start pulling back, the hardest part isn't the silence, it's the guilt. You feel like you're doing something wrong just by protecting yourself. You second guess every boundary. You wonder if you're being cold, if you're being selfish, if you're changing. Because when you spent your life being the one who gives, rest feels like laziness, distance feels like cruelty, and saying no feels like failure. You weren't taught how to have limits. You were taught how to endure. So the moment you stop overextending, your nervous system panics. It tells you to explain yourself, to soften it, to give just a little more so no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth: boundaries don't feel good at first because you're used to being useful, not protected. You learned that love meant access, that care meant availability, that being needed was the same as being valued. So when you remove access, it feels like you're taking something away, but you're not. You're just finally keeping something for yourself, and that discomfort, that's not you doing something wrong. That's you breaking a pattern that was costing you more than you realized. People who care deeply often confuse love with sacrifice. They believe loving someone means giving more, trying harder, holding on longer than they should. They tell themselves, if I'm patient enough, they'll notice. If I stay kind, it'll balance out. If I keep showing up, it'll be worth it. But love was never meant to cost you your peace. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being good meant being accommodating. That being loving meant putting yourself last. So you stayed quiet about your needs. You ignored your exhaustion. You told yourself it wasn't that bad as long as everyone else was okay. But sacrifice without reciprocity doesn't make love deeper. It makes it heavier. Because when you're always the one adjusting, the relationship stops being shared. It becomes one-sided. And the scariest part is people can get used to that version of you. They don't ask if it's costing you anything. They just assume you'll keep paying the price until one day you realize love shouldn't feel like self-abandonment. Caring deeply doesn't mean giving endlessly, and loving someone should never require you to disappear in the process. There's a moment when something finally clicks. You get tired of proving that you're genuine, tired of explaining your intentions, tired of showing people your heart just so they can decide whether it deserves care. So you stop performing, you don't overextend anymore, you don't chase reassurance, you don't give more just to feel secure. And at first that feels uncomfortable because you're not used to being this guarded. You're used to leading with softness even when it costs you. But protecting your heart isn't the same as closing it. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming selective. You start noticing who respects your limits and who only liked you when you were endlessly available. You see who adjusts with you, instead of expecting you to bend every time, and that's when you realize something important. You don't need to prove your kindness. The right people will feel it without needing to take advantage of it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you less loving. It just means you're finally loving yourself too. Once you stop overgiving, you start noticing something clearly. Not everyone reacts the same way. Some people get uncomfortable, they push back, they ask why you're different now. They miss the version of you that gave without limits and never asked for anything back. But others adjust. They respect the boundary. They meet you halfway. They don't make you feel guilty for needing space or balance. And that difference matters because it shows you who valued you and who only valued what you provided. The right people don't punish you for protecting your heart. They don't withdraw when you stop overextending. They lean in. They check on you. They notice your effort because it's no longer automatic. They give without keeping score. And for the first time, caring doesn't feel draining. It feels mutual. You realize you don't have to shrink your heart to keep people around. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be worthy of love. The people meant for you won't disappear when you stop bleeding quietly. They'll stay because they never needed you to hurt in order to feel close. At the end of all this, you realize something important. Your softness was never the problem. Caring deeply wasn't a mistake. Being attentive wasn't wrong. Showing up wasn't foolish. The pain came from giving that level of care to people who didn't know how to hold it. Because the right people don't drain you. They don't get comfortable taking. They don't wait until you pull back to finally notice your value. They see it while you're still giving, and they give back. With the right people, your kindness doesn't become invisible. Your effort doesn't become expected. Your heart doesn't become something to manage. It becomes appreciated. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to overextend. You don't have to lose pieces of yourself just to stay connected. Your softness becomes strength because it's met with care, not entitlement. And that's when you understand the goal was never to stop caring. It was to stop pouring your heart into places that couldn't return it. So keep your softness, just place it wisely, because in the right hands, your heart won't hurt this much. It'll finally feel safe. I don't think love works anymore. Not the way it used to. Not the way we were told it would. Because everything about it feels fragile now. Disposable. Temporary. I used to believe love was something you built and protected. Something you chose every day. something that got stronger the more you worked through it. Now it feels like something people try on, like an outfit, like a phase, like something that lasts until it becomes inconvenient. And maybe that's just my experience talking. Maybe I'm jaded, maybe I'm tired, but it's hard not to feel this way when you've watched effort get ignored, loyalty get tested, and consistency get replaced with excitement. It feels like the people who care the most lose the fastest. The ones who communicate openly get labeled too much. The ones who stay calm get called boring. The ones who try to build something stable get overlooked for something unpredictable. And I don't understand when stability became unattractive. When did peace start feeling dull? When did consistency start feeling optional? When did love turn into a competition of who cares less? Because that's what it feels like now. Who replies slower? Who shows less emotion? Who keeps more options open? Who can detach quicker? It feels like the winner in modern love is the one who invests the least, and that doesn't make sense to me, because love was never supposed to be strategic. It was supposed to be mutual. It was supposed to feel safe. It was supposed to feel intentional. But now, it feels like leverage. It feels like power dynamics. It feels like emotional poker, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't affect me. I don't want to play games. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to protect myself. I don't want to withhold affection just to maintain mystery. But every time I show up genuinely, it feels like I lose. And after enough losses, you start questioning the system, not yourself, the system. Because if doing things the right way keeps ending the wrong way, you start wondering if the rules changed, and maybe they did. Social media makes everyone feel replaceable. Dating apps make options endless. Attention is constant. Validation is everywhere, so commitment feels outdated. Why work through something uncomfortable when you can scroll into something new? Why communicate through confusion when you can ghost and reset? Why fix when you can replace? And I hate that mindset, but I see it everywhere. And after a while, it makes you wonder if love is even designed to last in this environment. If loyalty is rare, if depth is rare, if patience is rare. And when something is rare, it's harder to find. And when it's harder to find, you start feeling like maybe it doesn't work anymore. Not because love isn't real, but because people aren't built to sustain it. And that's the scariest thought, because I don't want to become cold. I don't want to stop believing, but I'm tired of investing in something that feels unstable. I'm tired of building just to watch it collapse. I'm tired of thinking something is solid just to realize it was temporary. And maybe love still works. Maybe it's just harder to find. Maybe it requires more maturity than most people are willing to bring. But right now, it feels broken. Not love itself, but the way we handle it. And I don't know if that's pessimism talking or experience. I think what makes me say, I don't think love works anymore isn't bitterness, it's exhaustion. Because every time I try to approach it the right way, intentional, honest, consistent, it feels like I'm bringing depth into a space that rewards detachment. And after a while, you start feeling like you're built wrong for this era. Like maybe you care too much. Like maybe you expect too much. Like maybe you still believe in something that everyone else quietly downgraded. It feels like effort used to mean something. Now effort feels risky. Because the more you give, the more exposed you are. And exposure in modern dating feels dangerous. The one who opens up first is vulnerable. The one who commits first is replaceable. The one who expresses feelings first is too invested. So people hold back, they ration affection, they ration honesty, they ration effort. And when both people are rationing, nothing fully forms. It becomes this half-built connection where nobody is fully in, just partially attached and partially guarded. And that's where love starts to feel like it doesn't work, because love requires surrender, not recklessness. Not obsession, but surrender. You have to be willing to be seen, willing to risk loss, willing to invest without guaranteed return. And nobody wants to do that anymore. Everyone wants certainty before commitment, proof before vulnerability, security before effort. But But that's not how love works. Love is built in uncertainty, it's built in risk, it's built in choosing someone without knowing the full outcome. And we live in a time where uncertainty feels intolerable. We want options, we want backups, we want insurance. So instead of building depth with one person, we keep one foot out the door just in case. And you can't build something real with one foot already outside. That's why it feels broken. Not because love itself stopped working, but because we approach it defensively now. And I get it. People have been hurt, people have been betrayed, people have been replaced, so they protect themselves. But protection can slowly turn into detachment, and detachment kills depth. You can't love deeply if you're constantly calculating exits. You can't bond securely if you're scanning for upgrades. You can't build trust if you're always half preparing for collapse. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to adapt to that. I don't want to love strategically. I don't want to care less just to stay safe. I don't want to pretend I don't feel strongly just to avoid looking invested. But when you keep getting hurt for showing up fully, you start wondering if maybe the world rewards the opposite. And that's where the doubt creeps in. Maybe love doesn't work anymore because too many people are operating from fear instead of intention. Too many people want the feeling of love without the responsibility of it. They want butterflies but not boundaries, excitement but not effort, chemistry but not consistency, and chemistry fades without consistency. Excitement fades without stability. Butterflies disappear when there's no structure holding them, so relationships collapse, and instead of reflecting, people reset, and the cycle continues. And when you've seen that cycle enough times, it's hard not to feel like something fundamental shifted. Like the culture around love changed. Like commitment feels heavier now. Like loyalty feels optional. Like patience feels outdated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are still people who believe in depth. Maybe there are still people who value stability. Maybe there are still people who don't treat connection like it's disposable. But when your personal experiences keep showing the opposite, it's hard to stay optimistic. It's hard to believe love worked when everything around it feels temporary. And I don't want to lose faith, but I also don't want to keep pretending it's easy, because it's not anymore. And maybe love still works, but maybe it only works when two people are equally ready to stop playing defense, and that combination feels rare, not impossible, just rare. And rare takes patience, and patience feels hard when you've already invested so much of it before. So yeah, right now it feels broken. But maybe what's broken isn't love. Maybe it's how we've learned to approach it, and that might be fixable, but only if both people are willing to actually build instead of constantly preparing to leave. Maybe the real reason I don't think love works anymore is because it feels like timing is always off. You meet someone who seems aligned, you connect, you talk for hours, you feel understood, and then something small shifts. Not dramatic, not explosive, just subtle. They pull back slightly, energy changes, consistency drops, and instead of addressing it directly, things fade. That's what modern love feels like. Not endings, fading, no real closure, no real confrontation, just gradual detachment, and it leaves you questioning everything. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misread the depth? Did they ever feel it the way I did? Because when something ends without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks, and most of the time the blanks aren't kind. You start blaming yourself. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I didn't move fast enough, and that mental spiral gets exhausting. Love starts feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces. Like no matter how carefully you approach it, something unpredictable shifts. And maybe that unpredictability is what makes it feel broken, because love requires stability to grow. You can't build something meaningful on inconsistent ground. You can't plant something deep in unstable soil. And right now, everything feels unstable. People are distracted. Attention spans are shorter. Validation is constant. It's hard to compete with instant dopamine, because love isn't instant dopamine. It's slow burn. it's repetition, it's routine, it's choosing someone again and again, even when the excitement settles. And we live in a culture that constantly chases the next high. So once comfort replaces adrenaline, people confuse it with boredom. Once peace replaces intensity, people think something's missing, but peace isn't missing something. Peace is the goal. And maybe that's why love feels like it doesn't work anymore. Because people are chasing sparks instead of substance. They want fireworks every day, but fireworks aren't sustainable. They're loud, they're bright, they're temporary. Real love isn't fireworks, it's foundation, and foundations aren't flashy. They're steady, and steady doesn't trend well. Steady doesn't go viral, steady doesn't give you constant emotional spikes, but steady is what lasts. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've confused intensity with compatibility. Maybe we've confused excitement with alignment. Maybe we've confused attention with affection. And when those illusions fade, people assume love failed, but maybe love didn't fail, maybe expectations did. Still, it's hard not to feel tired, because every time you start believing in something new, you're also bracing for impact. You don't enter connections open anymore. You enter them cautiously, guarded, prepared, and that guarded energy changes everything, because love thrives in openness, and guarded hearts can't fully attach. So it becomes this cycle. People get hurt, they protect themselves, they enter something new with walls up. The connection never fully forms, it collapses. They say, see, love doesn't work. But maybe the walls are the problem. Maybe we're all trying to avoid pain so aggressively that we're also avoiding depth. And I don't know how to fix that, because I understand why people guard themselves. I do it too. After enough disappointment, you start building armor, but armor blocks connection just as much as it blocks harm. And that's the dilemma. How do you stay open in a world that keeps showing you how easy it is to be replaced? How do you trust when you've seen how quickly people move on? How do you believe in permanence when everything feels temporary? Those questions don't have easy answers. And that's why sometimes it feels easier to just say, love doesn't work anymore. Because admitting it feels broken, feels safer than admitting you're still hoping it does. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe I don't actually think love is broken. Maybe I'm just scared that I won't find someone who approaches it the way I do. Someone who values depth over dopamine, stability over sparks, consistency over chaos. Because if that kind of person still exists, then maybe love still works. It's just rare. And rare feels invisible when you've only experienced the opposite. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe the way we approach it is. And maybe the real challenge isn't finding love. It's finding someone who isn't playing defense the whole time, because love can't work if both people are preparing for it to fail. It only works when both decide to build, not brace, and that's what I'm still trying to believe. I think what really makes me say love doesn't work anymore is how disposable everything feels. Nothing feels permanent. Not feelings, not promises, not even history. You can spend months building something with someone. Routines, memories, habits, inside jokes, and then one day it's like it never happened. They move on, they reset, they rebrand their life without you in it, and you're left sitting there wondering how something that felt so real could be treated so lightly. It makes you question whether permanence even exists anymore. Because love used to mean endurance. It used to mean working through discomfort. It used to mean fighting for connection when things got complicated. Now it feels like the moment things feel heavy, people exit. The moment conflict shows up, people reconsider. The moment effort is required consistently, people get tired, and I'm not saying everyone is like that. But it's common enough that it starts to feel normal, and when something unhealthy becomes normalized, you start adjusting your expectations, you start lowering standards without even realizing it. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just how it is now, maybe I'm expecting too much, maybe stability is unrealistic. And that's the dangerous part, because once you start believing depth is unrealistic, you start accepting less than you deserve. You start settling for half effort, half commitment, half presence, and half love never feels secure. It feels temporary, it feels like you're constantly on probation. Like you have to maintain value instead of simply being valued, and that's exhausting. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being evaluated weekly. It shouldn't feel like you're one mistake away from being replaced, but that's what modern dating culture does. It keeps everyone slightly disposable because there's always another option, and options change the psychology of commitment. Now, when people feel like there's endless supply, they don't invest deeply. They sample, they test, they compare, they upgrade, and depth requires focus. You can't build something meaningful if you're constantly scanning the horizon. And I'm tired of feeling like depth is rare, like loyalty is rare, like emotional maturity is rare. Because if those things are rare, then sustainable love becomes rare too. And when something becomes rare, it starts feeling mythical, like a concept instead of a reality. And I don't want love to feel mythical. I want it to feel grounded, attainable, real. But it's hard to believe in that when everything around you looks temporary. It's hard to stay optimistic when you've watched people replace long-term connections in weeks, when you've seen loyalty get overlooked for excitement, when you've seen communication get labeled as too intense. It makes you question if the qualities you value are even appreciated anymore. And I refuse to become colder just to survive in this environment, but sometimes I understand why people do. Because caring fully feels risky, showing up fully feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe when you've seen how quickly people pivot. So instead of opening fully, people guard. Instead of committing deeply, people hesitate. Instead of building, people browse. And browsing never creates attachment, it creates distraction. So maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore, because too many people are browsing instead of building. Too many people are entertaining instead of committing. Too many people are protecting themselves instead of participating fully. And when both people are slightly guarded, slightly detached, slightly prepared to leave, the connection never roots deeply, it stays surface level. And surface level love doesn't survive pressure. It collapses the moment something real tests it. And that collapse reinforces the belief, see, love doesn't work. But maybe love isn't failing. Maybe it's just not being handled properly. Maybe it requires two people who are equally tired of games, equally tired of ego, equally ready to stop scanning and start building. And that combination is rare, not impossible, just rare. And when something is rare, it takes time to find. But when you've already waited, already invested, already tried, it's hard not to feel discouraged. It's hard not to say, maybe this just doesn't work anymore. Because hope feels heavy when you've carried it through disappointment repeatedly. Still, there's a small part of me that refuses to fully give up, not because I haven't been hurt, but because I know what depth feels like, and I know I'm capable of giving it. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe it just feels misaligned. Maybe I haven't met someone operating at the same level yet, and maybe love only doesn't work when one person is building and the other is browsing. And next time I won't settle for someone who's just browsing, because I'm done treating love like something experimental. I want something intentional, and if that's rare, then I'll wait, but I won't pretend that what's common right now feels functional, because it doesn't, and that's why sometimes it feels broken. Another reason I feel like love doesn't work anymore is because nobody seems patient enough for it. Real love is repetitive. It's waking up and choosing the same person on regular days, not just exciting ones. It's having conversations that aren't aesthetic. It's working through misunderstandings. It's sitting in awkward silence sometimes. It's resolving conflict instead of avoiding it. And patience feels rare now. The moment something feels complicated, people start questioning compatibility instead of questioning their communication. The moment effort feels required, people start asking if there's someone easier. The moment discomfort shows up, people confuse it with wrong person. But discomfort isn't always misalignment. Sometimes it's growth, sometimes it's two different perspectives trying to learn each other, and learning takes time, but time feels expensive in a world where attention is cheap. It's easier to restart with someone new than it is to repair with someone familiar. It's easier to chase a fresh high than maintain steady connection. It's easier to scroll than sit, and when everything around you reinforces immediacy, patience feels outdated. But love has never been immediate. It starts fast sometimes, and sure, but it sustains slowly, and sustainability isn't exciting. It's disciplined, it's structured, it's built. And I think a lot of people want the feeling of falling in love, but not the responsibility of staying in love. Falling is automatic, staying is intentional, falling feels magical, staying feels deliberate, and deliberate takes effort, and effort feels optional now. That's what makes it feel broken. Because if two people aren't equally patient, equally committed to working through friction, the relationship never stabilizes. It stays fragile, and fragile things shatter easily. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because it was never given time to become strong. You can't plant something and expect it to grow overnight, but people expect emotional security immediately. They expect certainty quickly. They expect perfection early. And when reality shows flaws, they exit instead of adjusting. And after experiencing that enough times, you start questioning whether anyone actually stays long enough to build something durable. It's exhausting to be the only one willing to sit in discomfort and talk it through. It's exhausting to be the only one committed to fixing instead of fleeing. It's exhausting to feel like you're building while the other person is evaluating, and evaluation kills intimacy. Because if someone is constantly assessing whether you're worth it, they're never fully in. They're half invested, half prepared to leave. And love doesn't grow in half investment, it grows in commitment. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe commitment does, maybe patience does, maybe resilience does, because real love requires all three, and without them it collapses under the weight of normal human imperfection, and humans are imperfect, always, which means love will always require forgiveness, always require communication, always require choosing someone even when it's not convenient, and if people aren't willing to do that consistently, then yeah, it starts to feel like love doesn't work anymore because nobody is sustaining it long enough to see it mature. And maturity is where love actually becomes powerful, not in the butterflies, not in the early intensity, but in the stability that comes after. And maybe we're just living in a time that glorifies the beginning but undervalues the maintenance, and maintenance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And I'm not ready to say love is dead, but I am ready to admit that patience feels endangered, and without patience, nothing lasting survives. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because nobody trusts it. Not fully, not without hesitation. Everyone says they want something real, but when something real starts forming, fear shows up faster than commitment. Fear of being replaced, fear of being cheated on, fear of being the one who cares more, fear of looking stupid. So instead of leaning in, people brace. They stay slightly detached. They keep backup options emotionally. They don't say everything they feel. They don't invest fully. And when two people are both protecting themselves at the same time, nothing deep ever roots. It becomes this cautious connection where both are waiting for the other to prove something first. Show me you won't leave. Show me you're serious. Show me I'm safe. But safety doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from participation. And participation requires risk. That's the part that feels lost now. Nobody wants to risk looking foolish for love, but love has always required that. You have to be willing to look foolish, to say I care first, to show up consistently even when you don't know the outcome, to invest without a guarantee, and guarantees don't exist. So instead of risking vulnerability, people risk nothing. They test, they observe, they calculate, they delay emotional investment until it feels secure, but emotional security doesn't grow from calculation. grows from consistency, and consistency requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. It's a cycle, and when one part is missing, the whole structure collapses. So maybe love feels broken because too many people are trying to feel safe before they've actually built anything safe. They want certainty before commitment, but certainty is something you earn together, not something you demand up front. And I get it. Nobody wants to be hurt again. Nobody wants to feel like the fool who cared more. Nobody wants to invest months just to be replaced in weeks. But if both people are guarding themselves at all times, love never gets a chance to breathe. It suffocates under suspicion, it weakens under ego, it dissolves under comparison, and comparison is everywhere now. We compare partners to people online, we compare relationships to curated timelines, we compare our connection to someone else's highlight reel, and comparison erodes gratitude. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present, and when gratitude fades, dissatisfaction grows, and dissatisfaction looks for alternatives, and alternatives are always available now, so commitment feels heavier than ever, because staying means choosing one thing in a world full of options, and that feels scary to people who haven't learned how to be content. And that's another part of why it feels like love doesn't work, because contentment is rare, and without contentment nothing feels enough. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the stability. There's always a what if, and what if is poison to commitment. What if there's someone better? What if I'm settling? What if this isn't the highest version of love? But love isn't about maximizing, it's about choosing. And choice requires focus, and focus requires discipline. And discipline isn't romanticized anymore. Excitement is, intensity is, instant chemistry is. But chemistry alone can't sustain anything. It ignites, it doesn't stabilize, and maybe that's why love feels like it fails. Because people confuse ignition with foundation. They fall fast, they burn bright, they collapse quickly. And then they say, see? Love doesn't work. But maybe what didn't work was patience. Maybe what didn't work was emotional maturity. Maybe what didn't work was two people being equally willing to commit without constantly scanning for something better. I don't think love stopped working. I think standards changed. I think attention got divided. I think ego got louder. And I think fear got stronger. And fear makes people protect themselves in ways that sabotage the very thing they want. So when I say I don't think love works anymore, maybe what I really mean is I don't see enough people willing to handle it properly. Because love is simple. People complicate it. Love is consistent. People are inconsistent. Love is intentional. People are distracted. And until two people show up ready to be disciplined about connection, not just excited about it, it's going to keep feeling unstable. And that's exhausting, because I don't want to approach love like a risk assessment. I want to approach it like a build. But building requires two architects, not one builder and one evaluator. And maybe that's the real challenge, not finding love, but finding someone who isn't quietly preparing for it to fail. Because love only doesn't work when someone stops working at it. And too many people stop the moment it requires effort instead of adrenaline. And I'm tired of adrenaline. I want foundation. And until I find someone who wants foundation too, yeah, it's gonna feel broken. Another reason it feels like love doesn't work anymore is because people are addicted to potential more than presence. They fall in love with what something could be instead of what it actually is. They fall for the idea, the fantasy, the imagined future. But when reality sets in, flaws, habits, differences, instead of adjusting expectations, they downgrade the connection. It's like people want perfection in a human body, and humans aren't perfect. So the moment imperfection shows up, doubt follows. She could be better. He could be more. This might not be the best I can get. And that mindset destroys contentment. Because if you're always wondering if something better exists, you'll never water what's in front of you. You'll keep browsing instead of building. And browsing doesn't create depth. It creates comparison. And comparison slowly poisons appreciation. You stop seeing what someone does for you. You focus on what they don't. You stop valuing consistency. You crave excitement, and excitement is unstable. Love isn't built on constant excitement. It's built on reliability, and reliability feels boring if you're addicted to adrenaline. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want peace, they want chaos that feels passionate. They want intensity that feels cinematic. They want love to look like a movie, dramatic, emotional, unpredictable, but real love is structured, it's routine, it's sometimes quiet, and quiet doesn't trend, quiet doesn't feel thrilling, but quiet is secure. And security is rare in a world that rewards unpredictability. So when someone gives you stability, it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable gets labeled as not right, so they leave, and then they chase something that feels intense again, and that cycle repeats, and every time it collapses, they say, love just doesn't work for me. But maybe it's not love that's failing, maybe it's expectations, maybe it's the craving for perfection, maybe it's the refusal to accept that long-term connection requires compromise and discipline, because compromise doesn't mean settling, it means adjusting, it means understanding that no person will check every box, it means valuing depth over dopamine. And dopamine fades, depth stays, but depth requires maturity. And maturity isn't loud, it's subtle, it's calm, it's secure enough to not constantly question whether something better exists, and that kind of security feels rare right now. It feels like people want love to feel good every second, but no connection feels good every second. There are misunderstandings, bad days, moments of frustration, and if someone expects constant emotional highs, they'll leave the moment it feels neutral. And neutral isn't bad. Neutral is stable, but stability doesn't give you butterflies, it gives you peace, and peace feels unfamiliar in a culture addicted to stimulation. So yeah, sometimes it feels like love doesn't work anymore because people don't recognize it. When it's calm, they mistake chaos for chemistry. They mistake unpredictability for passion, they mistake anxiety for attraction, and healthy love doesn't feel anxious, it feels steady. But if someone's nervous system is used to chaos, steady feels boring, and boring feels wrong, so they leave something stable for something intense. And intensity fades, and the cycle repeats, and that repetition creates the illusion that love is broken. But maybe what's broken is the way people define it. Maybe love hasn't changed, maybe we have, maybe we expect too much fantasy and not enough responsibility. Maybe we want effortless depth, but depth is never effortless. It's built, maintained, protected, and protection requires discipline, and discipline isn't romanticized anymore. But without it, nothing lasts. Well, maybe love still works, but only for people who understand that it's not supposed to feel like fireworks forever. It's supposed to feel like foundation, and foundation doesn't crumble at the first sign of imperfection. It strengthens when both people decide to reinforce it. And that's the part that feels rare. Not love, but two people equally ready to treat it like something sacred instead of something optional. And until that alignment happens, yeah, it's gonna keep feeling broken. And sometimes I wonder if the reason love feels broken is because people are more afraid of vulnerability than they are of loneliness. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability feels dangerous. Loneliness just feels empty. Vulnerability feels exposing. And exposing yourself in a world where people can replace you in days feels reckless. So instead of risking being fully seen, people present edited versions of themselves, curated personalities, controlled emotions, measured effort. And when two curated versions try to connect, the connection stays surface level, because depth only forms when masks come off. And masks are safer. Masks protect ego. Masks protect pride. Masks protect image, but masks also block intimacy, and intimacy is what makes love feel alive. Without intimacy, you're just sharing space, and shared space isn't the same as shared depth. Maybe love feels broken because nobody wants to be the first one to remove the armor. Nobody wants to be the one who says, I care, without knowing if it'll be reciprocated. Nobody wants to look foolish, but love has always required risk, and if risk tolerance is low, depth tolerance is low too, and low depth means fragile connection, and fragile connection collapses under normal human imperfection. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it never had the chance to, because it was protected too heavily. You can't build something strong if both people are guarding themselves more than they're investing. And that guarding energy feels everywhere now. It feels like people are in relationships half committed, half prepared to exit, always scanning, always evaluating, always calculating. And calculation kills spontaneity. It kills surrender. It kills the soft parts of love, because soft parts require trust, and trust requires time, and time requires patience, and patience feels scarce. So people rush into feelings but hesitate into commitment. They want intensity without obligation, connection without responsibility, attention without accountability, and that imbalance makes everything unstable, because love isn't just emotion. It's discipline, it's consistency when things feel normal, it's showing up when excitement fades, and showing up isn't glamorous, but it's powerful, and maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've glamorized beginnings and neglected maintenance, maybe we've romanticized sparks and ignored structure, and when structure isn't present, collapse feels inevitable, so love starts to feel broken. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it isn't being handled with care, and care requires emotional maturity, and emotional maturity isn't common, it's developed, and development requires self-awareness, and self-awareness requires reflection, and reflection requires sitting with discomfort, and a lot of people avoid discomfort at all costs. So instead of reflecting, they replace, instead of adjusting, they exit, instead of building, they restart, and restarting feels easier than repairing. But restarting resets the lesson too, and the cycle continues, and after watching enough cycles, it's hard not to feel like love is just temporary. Like everything eventually fades, like no one really stays. But maybe the problem isn't love, maybe it's our attention spans, maybe it's our tolerance for imperfection, maybe it's our fear of being fully seen, and maybe love only works when two people are brave enough to risk looking foolish for it, brave enough to commit without constant comparison, brave enough to stay when it's not cinematic, brave enough to build when it's not exciting. And that kind of bravery feels rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent, it just means selective. And maybe the reason love feels broken to me is because I've seen too much avoidance and not enough bravery. But that doesn't mean bravery doesn't exist, it just means I haven't experienced it consistently yet. And that's frustrating, but frustration doesn't equal impossibility. It just means the standard is high, and high standards take time to align with. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just misused, and until two people approach it with equal discipline and equal depth, it's going to keep feeling unstable. But I still believe, even if it's quiet belief now, that real love requires courage, and courage isn't loud, it's consistent. And when I find someone consistent enough to stay through discomfort instead of running from it, maybe it won't feel broken anymore. Maybe it'll finally feel built. There's another truth I don't always say out loud. Sometimes when I say I don't think love works anymore, what I really mean is I'm scared to believe in it again. Because believing in it requires hope, and hope is heavy when you've watched things fall apart more than once. It's easier to say love is broken than to admit you're afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to act detached than to admit you still want something real. It's easier to lower expectations than to risk disappointment. But the reason it still frustrates me so much is because I do believe in depth, I believe in loyalty, I believe in consistency, I believe in choosing someone and actually staying. So when I look around and see temporary everywhere, it feels like I'm out of place, like I'm built for something that isn't common anymore, and that can make you feel isolated. Because you start wondering if you're unrealistic, if you expect too much, if maybe you're the one who needs to adapt. But adapting to a culture that treats connection lightly feels like losing something essential, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to become someone who keeps emotional backups. I don't want to become someone who leaves at the first sign of discomfort. But when you keep getting hurt for caring deeply, you start questioning if depth is sustainable. You start questioning if maybe emotional availability is a liability. And that's where it starts to feel broken, because when emotional maturity feels like a disadvantage, something is misaligned. If being honest gets you labeled as too intense, if being consistent gets you labeled as too predictable, if being loyal gets you taken for granted, then it feels like the traits that build love aren't valued anymore, and that's exhausting. Because I don't want to play a game where detachment wins. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to maintain power. I don't want to approach relationships strategically. I want to approach them intentionally. And intentional love requires two people who are equally committed to depth, not one person building and one person browsing, not one person healing and one person distracting, not one person fighting and one person evaluating, two people building together. And maybe that's why it feels broken, because alignment like that feels rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because it requires both people to be self-aware enough to recognize what they're building. And self-awareness takes work, and not everyone does the work. But here's something I'm slowly realizing. Just because I haven't experienced that alignment consistently doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found someone operating at the same emotional frequency yet. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people who are still figuring themselves out, still healing, still exploring, still distracted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if two people aren't equally ready, love will always feel unstable. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe timing is, maybe readiness is, maybe emotional maturity is, and that's a different problem than love itself. Because love, real love, still requires the same ingredients it always has: trust, patience, consistency, effort, communication, choice. Those haven't changed. What's changed is how many people are willing to commit to them long term. And that's what makes it feel fragile, but fragile doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. And maybe the reason it feels broken is because I haven't experienced the selectivity paying off yet. So do I really think love doesn't work anymore? Or am I just tired? Tired of building with people who weren't ready? Tired of investing in connections that weren't aligned? Tired of watching things collapse because one person stopped trying? Maybe what feels broken isn't love. Maybe it's my optimism. Maybe it's my patience. Maybe it's my energy. Because loving deeply takes energy. Believing in something lasting takes courage. And after enough disappointment, courage feels heavy. But here's what I know. I don't want temporary. I don't want half effort. I don't want something that collapses the moment it feels normal. I want stability. I want intentionality. I want someone who doesn't get bored when peace replaces intensity. And if that's rare, then I'll accept that it's rare. But I won't accept that it's impossible, because I know I exist. And if I exist, someone who still believes in depth and loyalty and consistency, then that means other people like that exist too. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works because it's not common anymore, but uncommon doesn't mean extinct. It just means it requires discernment. It requires patience. It requires walking away from people who treat connection casually. And maybe that's the real shift. Maybe love doesn't work when we try to force it with the wrong people. Maybe it only works when both people are equally disciplined about it. And discipline isn't flashy, but it's powerful. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it's just rare enough that you have to be selective about who you build it with. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I refuse to become cold just because it's hard. I refuse to downgrade my depth just because others operate shallow. And one day, when two people who both believe in building, not browsing, meet each other, love won't feel broken. It'll feel intentional. And intentional love, that still works. There's a point where saying love doesn't work anymore becomes less about love and more about self-protection. Because if I convince myself it's broken, then I don't have to risk it again. If I label it dysfunctional, I don't have to open up. If I tell myself everyone leaves, then no one can surprise me when they do. It becomes armor. And armor feels safer than hope. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires believing someone will show up differently than the last person did. Hope requires trusting that the next connection won't collapse the same way the others did. And that's hard, because patterns create expectations. If you've seen inconsistency enough times, you start expecting it. If you've been replaced quickly, you start bracing for it. If you've watched effort go unmatched, you start rationing yours. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop loving the way you used to. You become careful, measured, guarded. You don't say everything you feel. You don't invest as quickly. You don't attach as deeply. And then when something ends, it hurts less, but it also meant less. And that's the trade-off nobody talks about. If you protect yourself enough, you reduce pain, but you also reduce depth. And depth is the whole point, so maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because I've been loving defensively. Not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. And cautious love never fully blooms. It survives. It doesn't flourish. And surviving isn't the same as thriving. Maybe I'm not doubting love. Maybe I'm doubting whether I can afford to feel that deeply again. Because feeling deeply means risking loss deeply. And loss has weight. And carrying that weight repeatedly makes you tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If I stop believing in love because others mishandled it, then I let their behavior reshape my character. And I don't want that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to operate from fear. I don't want to treat every new person like they're already guilty of someone else's mistakes. But healing doesn't happen instantly. Trust doesn't reset overnight. And rebuilding optimism takes time, so maybe love isn't broken. Maybe I'm just rebuilding my trust in it. Maybe what feels like cynicism is actually exhaustion. Maybe what feels like disbelief is actually disappointment that hasn't fully healed, because when I'm honest with myself, I still want depth. I still want consistency. I still want something stable and intentional. If I truly believed love didn't work anymore, I wouldn't still crave it. I wouldn't still think about it. I wouldn't still care this much. The fact that I'm frustrated proves I still believe in it. You don't get frustrated over something you've given up on. You get frustrated over something you still want, but haven't found. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe love isn't broken. Maybe my patience is just being tested. Maybe my standards are filtering out what doesn't align. Maybe every failed connection isn't proof that love doesn't work. Maybe it's proof that misalignment doesn't. And misalignment is common, but alignment is rare. And rare things take time to find. So maybe I need to stop saying love is broken. Maybe I need to say love is selective. Maybe I haven't experienced the right version of it yet. Because the version I want, stable, mutual, disciplined, requires two people equally committed to depth. And depth isn't everywhere. But it exists, I exist, which means someone else like me exists too. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people at different stages of emotional maturity, different levels of readiness, different levels of self-awareness, and that doesn't mean love is dead. It just means timing matters, and readiness matters, and alignment matters. So yeah, some days it feels broken, some days it feels like effort goes nowhere. Some days it feels like loyalty isn't valued, but deep down, I don't think love stopped working. I think I'm just tired of building with people who weren't built to stay. And that's different, because when two people are both ready, Not just interested, not just attracted, but ready. Love doesn't collapse easily. It stabilizes, it deepens, it roots. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it just requires the right two people at the right time. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I'm not done believing in it. I'm just more careful about who I build it with. And that's growth.
Not defeat.
I found out what she really thought of me. And I wish I didn't, because in my head, it was different. I thought she respected me. I thought she valued me. I thought the way I showed up actually meant something to her. But the truth, it wasn't what I believed. And it didn't come out in a direct way. Not a conversation. Not something she sat me down and said. It came out indirectly, through things I wasn't supposed to hear, through how she spoke when I wasn't around. And that's when it hit me. The version of me in her head wasn't the same as the version of me I thought she saw. At first I didn't want to believe it because it didn't match how she acted around me. With me, she seemed calm, interested, like she actually cared. But what I heard didn't sound like that version of her at all. It sounded detached, like I wasn't that important, like I was just there. And that's what messes with you. When someone treats you one way to your face and thinks something completely different behind it, because now you don't know what was real, the way she talked to you, or the way she talked about you. And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Every memory started changing. Moments that felt genuine started feeling questionable. Things she said started sounding different in my head, because now I was looking at everything through a new lens, a more honest one. And the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. Why sometimes her energy felt off. Why sometimes I felt like I was trying harder. Why something always felt slightly uneven. I just didn't want to accept it back then. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe they see you differently than you see them. You want to believe it's mutual, that the respect is equal, that the value is the same on both sides. But it wasn't. Not really. Because if she truly saw me the way I thought she did, she wouldn't have spoken about me like that. She wouldn't have minimized what I was giving. She wouldn't have treated my presence like something replaceable. And that's the part that hits your ego. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way. Because now you're not just dealing with losing her. You're dealing with realizing how little you meant in her perspective. While you were taking her seriously, she wasn't taking you the same way, and that imbalance, it hurts more than the ending. For a while I started questioning myself, like maybe I misread everything. Maybe I thought it was deeper than it actually was. Maybe I gave too much meaning to something that wasn't built to hold it. Because when someone sees you as less than what you believed, it makes you feel like you got it wrong. But here's what I had to understand. Just because she didn't value me properly, doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. The problem wasn't who I was, it was how she saw me. And you can't control that. You can show up right, you can be real, you can be consistent. But if someone already has a limited view of you, they're going to treat you based on that, no matter how you show up. And that's why nothing I did changed it, because the issue wasn't effort, it was perception. Once I understood that, the pain started shifting, because now it wasn't about trying to prove something to her anymore. It was about realizing I was giving energy to someone who didn't even see it properly. And that's a different kind of clarity, because it makes you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood by someone who already decided how they see you. And honestly, I'm glad I found out, even though it hurt, because I would have kept going, thinking it was deeper than it actually was, thinking she valued me the way I valued her, and that would have kept me stuck. But the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, it frees you. So yeah, then I found out what she really thought of me, and it wasn't what I expected, but now I see it clearly. The right person doesn't make you question your value. They don't talk about you like you're nothing. They don't treat you like you're replaceable. They see you fully, clearly, and they move accordingly. So I'm not mad at what I found out. I'm just glad I didn't stay blind to it, because now I know one thing for sure. I'd rather know the truth than keep believing something that was never real. I saw her with him, the same guy she told me not to worry about, and in that moment, everything made sense, not slowly, not over time, instantly, because all those times I felt something was off, all those moments I told myself I was overthinking, all those gut feelings I tried to ignore, they weren't wrong, I just didn't want them to be true. At first I just stood there, not reacting, not moving, because there's something about seeing it with your own eyes that hits different than just thinking about it. It's not a guess anymore, it's not a feeling, it's real. And in that moment, everything I tried to deny became clear. I remembered every time she said, "He's just a friend. You don't have to worry about him. It's nothing like that." And I believed her, not because I was naive, but because I trusted her, and that's what made it hurt more. Not just seeing them together, but realizing I defended something that was already falling apart. All those moments where my gut told me something was off, I ignored them because I didn't want to be that guy, the one who overthinks, the one who questions everything, the one who doesn't trust. So I stayed calm, stayed understanding, stayed loyal, while she was slowly giving that energy to someone else. And seeing them together, it wasn't even what they were doing, it was how it looked. Comfortable, natural, like something that didn't just start, like something that had been building while I was still trying to hold on to what we had. That's when it really hit me. I wasn't replaced overnight. I was replaced slowly, quietly, while I was still there. And that realization hurts in a different way, because it makes you feel like you were the only one still in it, while she was already somewhere else. For a second I wanted to confront her, ask questions, get answers, but then I realized something. I already had my answer right in front of me. No explanation could change what I just saw. And the truth is, it wasn't even about him. It was about what she chose. Because anyone can come into someone's life, but it takes a decision to give them the space that used to be yours. And she made that decision without saying it. That moment closed something in me, not out of anger, not out of hate, just clarity. Because now there was nothing left to question, nothing left to figure out. Everything I needed to understand, I was right there. I saw her with the guy she told me not to worry about. And yeah, that hurt. But it also did something else. It removed the last bit of doubt I had, because now I know this for sure. When something feels off, it usually is. And next time, I won't ignore that feeling just to keep something going. Because the truth will always show itself. Eventually. I shouldn't have texted her again. I knew at the moment I hit send, that feeling like you already know how it's gonna go, but you do it anyway. Not because you're confused, but because a part of you is still hoping it'll be different this time. So I sent it, simple message, nothing crazy, but deep down, it wasn't just a text, it was me giving the situation one more chance, and I already knew how that usually ends. At first I told myself it was harmless, just a message, just checking in, just seeing what would happen. But it wasn't just that, because when you text someone like that, after everything that already happened, you're not just reaching out, you're reopening something you already struggled to close, and I knew that, but I still did it, because there's always that small voice in your head that says, maybe this time it'll be different. The worst part is waiting after you send it, watching your phone, checking if they read it, trying to act like you don't care, when you clearly do. Because now it's not just about the message anymore, it's about what their response will tell you. Do they still care? Do they ignore you? Do they respond like nothing happened? And no matter what happens, it never feels how you hoped it would. When she replied, it didn't feel the same, not even close. The energy was different, shorter, colder, like I was someone from her past, not someone she still had a connection with. And that's when it hit me. I didn't just text her again. I reminded myself why it ended, because sometimes you don't need closure. You already had it. You just didn't accept it the first time. So you go back, not to fix anything, but to feel something again, even if that feeling ends up hurting you. And that's exactly what happened. That one message brought everything back. the memories, the feelings, the version of her I thought I still had, just to show me that version doesn't exist anymore. For a second, I felt like I reset my progress, like all the distance I created, all the clarity I built, got undone by one text. And that's frustrating because you know better. But feelings don't always follow what you know. But after sitting with it, I realized something. That message didn't set me back. It confirmed everything I was trying to accept. It showed me clearly there's nothing left there. Not in the way I wanted, and sometimes you need that. Not because you didn't already know, but because seeing it one more time makes it real in a different way. It removes the what if, it removes the doubt, it replaces hope with clarity. So yeah, I shouldn't have texted her again, but I'm not mad that I did, because now I don't wonder anymore. Now I don't think maybe it could have been different. I saw it, I felt it, and I understand it. Some things don't need another chance. They already showed you everything the first time, and next time I won't send that message because I won't need to. I think the hardest thing to admit now is that I waited too long for her. Not a few days, not a few weeks. I'm talking about months of believing that eventually she would see me the way I saw her. Because when you really care about someone, patience feels like loyalty. You tell yourself that love isn't supposed to be rushed, that real connections take time, that sometimes people just need space to figure things out. So I gave her that space. I stayed patient when things felt uncertain. I stayed loyal even when the energy between us started shifting. And every time something felt off, I told myself the same thing. Just give it time. Time would make her realize how much I cared. Time would make the connection stronger. Time would make everything finally fall into place. But looking back now, I realize something painful. Sometimes time doesn't fix things. Sometimes time just shows you what someone was never going to choose. And while I was waiting, she was slowly moving in a different direction. Well, when you wait for someone you care about, it doesn't feel like you're wasting time. It feels like you're being loyal. You tell yourself that patience is proof that your feelings are real, that if you just stay consistent long enough, eventually they'll see what's right in front of them. So that's what I did. I stayed. Even when the signs started becoming confusing, there were moments where she would pull closer again. Moments where the conversations felt like they used to. Moments where she would say things that made it seem like maybe, just maybe, we were finally getting somewhere. And every time that happened, it reset my hope. It made me believe the waiting was worth it. Because hope is powerful. Hope convinces you that the future will eventually match the way you feel. But the problem with hope is that it can keep you standing in the same place while the other person is slowly walking somewhere else. And I didn't see that at the time, because while I was waiting for things to become clearer, she was slowly becoming less certain about us. And the scariest part is how quietly that shift happens. It doesn't start with a big moment. It starts with small changes, replies that come slower, conversations that feel shorter, energy that feels just a little different than before. At first you ignore it because you tell yourself the same thing you've been telling yourself the whole time. Just give it time. But sometimes time doesn't move people closer. Sometimes it slowly moves them away. And by the time you realize that, you've already waited longer than you should have. The strange thing about waiting for someone is that you don't realize how much time you're giving away until you look back at it. While I was waiting for her to figure out her feelings, my whole mindset was built around patience. I told myself that real connections take time, that people sometimes need space before they realize what's right in front of them. So whenever things felt uncertain, I convinced myself that uncertainty was just part of the process. I thought eventually she would see me the way I saw her, but the longer I waited, the more the relationship started feeling one-sided. Not in obvious ways. She still talked to me. She still checked in sometimes. She still kept the connection alive just enough that it never felt completely over. And that's the part that kept me there. because every small moment of closeness made it seem like progress. Like maybe we were finally moving towards something real. But looking back now, those moments didn't mean we were getting closer. They just meant she wasn't ready to fully let me go yet. And there's a big difference between someone building something with you and someone keeping you close while they're still figuring out what they want. At the time, I couldn't see that difference clearly. All I knew was that I cared about her, and I believed that eventually she would care about me the same way. So I stayed patient, even when the signs started becoming harder to ignore, even when the connection started feeling less stable than it used to. Because once you invest that much time waiting for someone, it becomes harder to walk away. You start telling yourself that leaving now would mean all that waiting was for nothing. So you stay longer, you give it more time, you hope just a little more, and that's how you end up realizing something painful later on. You didn't just wait for her. You waited too long. The hardest part about waiting too long for someone is realizing that the time you gave them was real, even if the outcome wasn't. Because every day I stayed patient, I believed it meant something. Every message I sent, every conversation where I tried to understand her better, every moment where I chose to stay instead of walking away when things felt uncertain, to me those moments were proof that I cared, proof that the connection mattered enough to fight for. But there's something difficult about waiting that you don't notice until it's already happened. Waiting slowly turns into hoping, and hoping slowly turns into ignoring reality. There were signs that things weren't moving the way I thought they were. Moments where her effort didn't match mine. Moments where the connection felt like it was staying in the same place instead of growing. Moments where it felt like I was investing more emotionally than she was. But every time I noticed those signs, I told myself the same thing. Just give it more time. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe the connection might not lead anywhere. You want to believe the patience will eventually pay off. But the truth is, patience only works when both people are moving toward the same thing. If one person is waiting while the other person is slowly drifting away, time doesn't bring you closer. It just stretches the distance. And by the time I started realizing that, I had already waited longer than I should have. Another thing about waiting too long for someone is how quietly it changes your life. Because when you're emotionally invested in someone, your decisions start revolving around them. You hold space for them in your future. You imagine what things could become. You avoid moving on because a part of you still believes they might eventually choose you. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't explore other connections. I didn't let myself get too close to anyone else because, in my mind, I was already committed to her, even if the relationship wasn't fully defined. And that's the trap of waiting. You stay emotionally loyal to someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, not because you're naive, but because you believe loyalty will eventually be recognized. You believe that if someone sees how patient you are, how consistent you are, how much you care, they'll eventually realize you're the right person. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people appreciate your patience, sometimes they even care about you, but that doesn't always mean they'll choose you. And that's a painful thing to understand, because it means the time you gave them didn't guarantee the future you imagined. And when that realization finally hits, you start asking yourself a difficult question. Was I waiting for the right person? Or was I waiting for someone who was never going to choose me in the first place? Once I started asking myself that question, honestly, everything began to look different. Because when you stop looking at the situation through hope, you start seeing it through clarity. And clarity shows you things you didn't want to notice before. Like how often I was the one reaching out first, how often I was the one trying to keep the connection alive, how often I was the one convincing myself that things would eventually work out. At the time, I thought that was just what patience looked like. But now I understand something important. Patience in a relationship only makes sense when both people are building something together. If only one person is investing time, effort, and emotional energy, that's not patience. That's imbalance. And I was standing in that imbalance longer than I should have, because I kept believing that eventually the effort would be returned. Eventually the connection would stabilize. Eventually she would see me the same way I saw her, but eventually never came. And the hardest part about realizing that isn't just the heartbreak, it's realizing how much time you spent waiting for something that was never truly moving toward you. For a while, that realization made me feel foolish, because it made me feel like I should have known sooner, like I should have seen the signs earlier, like I should have walked away the moment things started feeling uncertain. But the truth is, caring about someone doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. When you believe in someone, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to believe their uncertainty is temporary. You want to believe the connection you feel will eventually become mutual, so you stay longer, you give more time, you hope a little harder, and sometimes that hope leads to something real. But sometimes it just leads to a lesson. And the lesson I learned is something I'll never forget. You shouldn't have to wait indefinitely for someone to recognize your value. If someone truly sees you as part of their future, they don't leave you standing in uncertainty for months. They choose you, and they show that choice through their actions. Once I understood that, the pain started changing into something else. Perspective. Because waiting too long for someone doesn't mean you were weak. It means you believed in the possibility of something meaningful. And there's nothing wrong with believing in people, but there's a difference between believing in someone and ignoring the reality of their actions, because actions always tell the truth eventually. Someone who truly wants you doesn't keep you waiting forever. They don't keep you guessing about where you stand. They don't keep you in a place where you feel like you're hoping more than you're building. They make their intentions clear, and if someone doesn't do that, the waiting only leads to one outcome. Eventually you realize you were holding space for someone who wasn't holding space for you. When I finally stopped waiting for her, something surprising happened. I started getting my clarity back. Because when you're waiting for someone emotionally, a part of your life feels paused. Your focus stays tied to the possibility of what could happen. Your decisions revolve around the connection. Your energy stays invested in someone who might not even be moving in the same direction. But the moment you stop waiting, everything shifts. You start seeing things more objectively. You start realizing how much emotional energy you were giving to someone who wasn't fully present, and you start understanding something important. The time you spent waiting wasn't wasted. It taught you exactly what you should never accept again. Looking back now, I can honestly say I waited too long for her, but I don't regret caring. I don't regret being patient, because those things say something about who I am. What I do regret is staying in uncertainty longer than I should have, because the right person doesn't make you wait forever to feel chosen. They don't keep you in a constant state of hoping. They don't make you question whether the connection is real. They make their intentions clear. They meet your effort with their own, and they move forward with you, not away from you. So yeah, I waited too long for her, but that experience taught me something I'll carry with me forever. Next time I won't stay in a place where I feel like I'm waiting to be chosen, because the right connection doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like moving forward together. I don't think I was ever her first choice. Not really. At the time I thought I was. She talked to me every day. She laughed at my jokes. She told me things she said she didn't tell anyone else. And when someone gives you that kind of attention, it's easy to believe you're the person they truly want. So I believed it. I believed that when she said she cared, she meant it. I believed that when she chose to spend time with me, it meant I mattered. I believed that whatever we were building was real. But looking back now, there were small signs I ignored. Little moments where something didn't fully add up, times where she seemed unsure about us, times where her attention felt divided, times where it felt like she was still searching for something even while she was with me. At the time, I brushed those moments off, because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe you're just an option. You want to believe you're the decision. So I stayed patient, I stayed loyal, I kept showing up the same way every day. But the truth is, when someone sees you as their first choice, you don't feel uncertain about it. You don't feel like you're competing with invisible possibilities. You don't feel like their attention could shift at any moment. Being someone's first choice feels stable. It feels clear. And what we had wasn't always clear. There were moments where it felt strong, but there were also moments where it felt like I was trying harder to keep the connection alive. Like I was the one holding the weight of something she wasn't fully sure about, and I didn't want to admit that to myself because nobody wants to believe there's someone's second option. But eventually the truth shows itself, not through words, through choices, and one day her choices made something very clear. I wasn't the person she truly wanted, I was the person she stayed with until someone else felt like a better direction. And that realization hurts in a way that's hard to explain, because it doesn't just break your heart, it makes you question every moment that came before it. Once the idea entered my head that I might not have been her first choice, it was impossible to ignore, because suddenly memories started looking different. Moments that once felt normal started carrying a different meaning. I remembered the times she hesitated when talking about the future, the times she seemed distracted when we were together, the times where her energy felt slightly distant, even though she was right there in front of me. Back then, I didn't question it too much. When you care about someone, you naturally assume the best about them. You assume the connection is mutual. You assume the effort you're putting in is being matched emotionally. But sometimes the truth sits quietly in the background while we convince ourselves everything is fine. And that's what it felt like when I started replaying those memories. Like the signs were always there, but I didn't want to see them. Because nobody wants to believe they're the backup plan. Nobody wants to believe they're the person someone stays with while they're still figuring out what they really want. But when someone truly sees you as their first choice, things feel different. There's clarity, there's certainty. You don't constantly feel like you have to prove why you deserve to be there. You don't feel like their attention might shift if the right opportunity appears. But with her, there were moments where I felt that uncertainty, and I kept pushing it away because admitting it would have meant admitting something painful, that maybe she cared about me, but not in the way I cared about her. And that's a difficult thing to face, because it means the connection wasn't equal. One person was fully invested, the other person was still deciding. And when one person is deciding while the other person is committed, the balance is already off. You're building something with someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, and eventually that imbalance reveals itself, not through arguments, not through dramatic moments, through decisions. And decisions don't lie. One day, her decision made something very clear to me. I wasn't the person she was always sure about. I was the person she stayed with, while she kept wondering if someone else might be a better choice. When you start realizing you were never someone's first choice, the hardest part isn't the breakup. It's the realization that you were trying to win a place in someone's life that was never fully yours. Because when someone truly chooses you, you don't feel like you're competing with invisible options. You don't feel like their attention could disappear the moment something new shows up. You don't feel like you constantly have to prove why you deserve to be there. But with her, that feeling existed sometimes, not all the time, just enough to quietly sit in the back of my mind. There were moments where everything felt perfect. We'd talk for hours, we'd laugh like nothing else in the world mattered. And during those moments, I believed completely that I was the person she wanted. But then there were other moments moments. Moments where she seemed unsure, moments where her energy changed, moments where I felt like I was the one holding the connection together. And the strange thing about being someone's second option is this: they can still care about you, they can still enjoy your company, they can still appreciate what you bring into their life, but deep down, there's a part of them that hasn't fully committed, a part of them that's still wondering, still looking, still asking themselves if there's something else out there that fits them better. And that's a painful place to stand in someone's life, because while you're building something real, they're still evaluating it. You're investing, they're deciding, you're certain, they're uncertain, and when one person is certain while the other person is unsure, the outcome is almost always the same. Eventually, the person who was unsure finds a direction that feels clearer to them. And when that happens, the person who was giving everything suddenly realizes something heartbreaking. They were never the final decision. They were the temporary one. The moment I finally accepted that I was never her first choice, everything started making more sense. For the longest time, I thought the problem was something I did wrong. Maybe I didn't say the right things. Maybe I didn't keep things exciting enough. Maybe I should have noticed the distance sooner. Your mind does that when someone walks away. It starts searching for mistakes you could fix. Because if there's a mistake, then maybe there was a way to save it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't losing because I failed. I was losing because she was never fully choosing me to begin with. There's a big difference between someone being with you and someone being certain about you. At the time, I thought those were the same thing, but they're not. Someone can spend time with you, someone can laugh with you, someone can even care about you, and still not see you as the person they're fully committed to. And when someone isn't fully committed, their heart stays open to other possibilities. That's where the uncertainty comes from. That's why the energy sometimes feels inconsistent. That's why you occasionally feel like you're trying harder than they are, because deep down one person is already sure and the other person is still deciding. And when someone is still deciding, the moment another option appears, everything shifts, not because you suddenly became less valuable, but because they were never finished searching. Looking back, that's what hurts the most. Not that she left, but that I gave my loyalty to someone who was still questioning if I was the person they really wanted, because loyalty only feels safe when it's mutual, when both people are standing in the same place emotionally, when both people have already decided this is the person I'm choosing. But that's not what we had. I had already chosen her. She was still deciding if she should choose me, and eventually, she didn't. After that realization hit me that I was never really her first choice, something inside me shifted. At first it felt humiliating, because nobody wants to admit they were standing in someone's life as a possibility instead of a priority. You start thinking about all the effort you gave, all the time you invested, all the patience you showed, all the loyalty you carried for someone who wasn't standing on the same level of certainty. And the painful part is this: while I was building something solid in my mind, she was still deciding whether she wanted to stay. That imbalance is invisible when you're inside the relationship, because when you love someone, you assume the feeling is mutual. You assume they're just as sure as you are. But certainty has a different energy. When someone is sure about you, there's no hesitation, no distance, no quiet sense that you're being evaluated. They don't keep looking around. They don't keep wondering if something better might appear. They simply choose you, and they keep choosing you. Looking back now, I can see the difference where, with her, there were moments where everything felt strong, but there were also moments where it felt like she was slightly pulling away. Moments where the connection felt uneven. Moments where it felt like I was trying to hold something steady while she was still questioning it. At the time, I thought those moments were temporary. I thought if I stayed patient, if I kept showing up the same way, eventually she would feel as certain as I did. But certainty doesn't grow out of pressure, it grows out of genuine alignment. And if someone doesn't feel that alignment, no amount of loyalty can force it. That's the truth I had to accept. She didn't leave because I failed. She left because she was never completely convinced that I was the person she wanted to build her future with. And that realization hurts in a very specific way because it makes you feel like you were standing in someone's life waiting to be chosen while they were quietly considering someone else. The hardest part about realizing you were never someone's first choice isn't just the heartbreak, it's the way it makes you question your own judgment. Because when you look back, you start wondering how you didn't see it sooner, how you didn't notice the hesitation, how you didn't recognize the moments where her energy didn't fully match yours. But the truth is, when you care about someone, you don't analyze them like a stranger. You trust them, you take their words seriously, you assume the connection means the same thing to them as it does to you. So when she said she cared, I believed her. When she spent time with me, I thought it meant I was important to her. When we talked about things that felt personal, I thought that meant we were building something real. And maybe in her own way she did care. But caring about someone and being certain about them are two completely different things. Someone can care about you and still not see you as their future. Someone can enjoy being with you while still wondering if someone else might feel more right. And when someone is still wondering, you end up standing in a very fragile place in their life, because the moment something new appears, something that feels more exciting, more aligned, or simply different, their uncertainty starts leaning in a new direction. And that's what eventually happened. She didn't suddenly stop liking me. She just found someone she felt more sure about. And the moment that happened, everything changed. The attention shifted, the conversations faded, the connection that once felt strong suddenly felt like it was slipping through my hands. In that moment, I finally understood something I had been avoiding. I wasn't losing my place in her life. I was losing the position I never truly had. I wasn't the person she had fully chosen. I was the person she stayed with while she was still deciding. Once I accepted that I was never her first choice, another realization started settling in. I wasn't just hurt because she left. I was hurt because of what it revealed about the entire relationship. Because when you think someone chose you, you build your whole mindset around that belief. You become loyal, you become patient, you invest your time and your emotions because you believe the other person is standing in the same place as you. But when you realize they weren't, it changes how you see everything that happened before. I started noticing the imbalance more clearly. The moments where I adjusted my schedule to make time for her. The moments where I tried to fix problems because I thought the relationship mattered equally to both of us. The moments where I stayed calm and patient during times she felt distant. I thought I was protecting something meaningful, but now I understand something I didn't see then. I was protecting a relationship that she was still questioning, and when one person is protecting something while the other person is still deciding if they even want it, the outcome is almost inevitable, because eventually the person who's unsure finds something that feels more certain. And when that happens, the person who was investing everything suddenly realizes something painful. They were standing in someone's life waiting to be chosen by someone who had never fully chosen them in the first place. That's a difficult truth to accept, because it forces you to admit that the relationship meant more to you than it did to them. It forces you to admit that while you were building something in your mind, they were still exploring their options, and that realization hits your pride in a way that's hard to describe, not because you hate the other person, but because it makes you question your own judgment. It makes you wonder how you didn't see the difference between being valued and being temporarily convenient. But over time, I started understanding something important. Being someone's first choice isn't something you should have to fight to become. It isn't something you should have to prove you deserve. When someone truly sees you as their first choice, it feels clear, it feels stable. You don't spend your time wondering if someone else might replace you, because they've already decided where they stand. And with her, that decision was never fully made, not in the way I thought it was. After enough time passed, the pain of realizing I was never her first choice slowly started turning into something else. Clarity, because once the emotions settle down, you begin seeing the relationship without the illusion you had while you were inside it. When I was with her, I kept thinking that if I just stayed loyal enough, patient enough, supportive enough, eventually she would see that I was the right person. I thought certainty was something that would grow over time, but real certainty doesn't need to be convinced, it doesn't need to be proven. When someone truly sees you as their first choice, they don't hesitate. They don't keep looking around, they don't treat you like a possibility they're still evaluating. They choose you, and that choice feels obvious. Looking back, I realized I spent a lot of time trying to earn a position that should have been natural. Trying harder, showing more patience, giving more understanding whenever things felt off, and at the time I thought that effort meant I was being strong, but now I understand something I didn't see before. You shouldn't have to fight to become someone's first choice. If someone truly values you, you won't feel like you're constantly proving your worth. You won't feel like your place in their life is temporary. You won't feel like their attention could shift the moment something new appears with the right person. That kind of uncertainty doesn't exist, and realizing that changed the way I looked at the whole situation, because for a long time I thought losing her meant I lost something important, but the truth is I lost a position that was never fully secure to begin with. I was trying to build a future with someone who had never fully decided that I was the person they wanted to build it with. And once you see that clearly, the pain starts losing its power, because you realize something important. You didn't lose someone who was fully committed to you. You lost someone who was still searching. Once I finally accepted that I was never her first choice, something unexpected happened. The story in my head started changing. For a long time, I looked at the situation like I had lost something valuable, like someone had taken my place, like I had somehow been replaced by someone better. But when you step back from the emotion and really look at the situation, you start realizing something different. I wasn't replaced, I was simply standing in a place that was never fully mine. Because when someone truly sees you as their first choice, there isn't a long period of hesitation. There isn't a constant feeling that something might change. There isn't a quiet sense that they're still evaluating their options. When someone knows they want you, the energy feels different. It feels stable, it feels certain. You don't spend your time wondering where you stand. You already know. And the truth is, with her, I never fully had that certainty. There were moments where it felt strong, moments where the connection felt real, but there were also moments where something felt slightly off, moments where I felt like I was trying harder to hold things together, moments where it felt like she was still deciding how much of herself she wanted to give. At the time, I ignored those feelings, because when you love someone, you want to believe the connection is mutual, you want to believe the effort is balanced, but effort and certainty are two different things. Someone can enjoy what you give them while still being unsure if you're the person they truly want. And when someone is unsure, their heart is still open to other possibilities. That's what eventually happened. She didn't suddenly stop caring about me. She simply found someone she felt more certain about. And once that certainty appeared, my place in her life disappeared. At first, that realization felt humiliating, but over time it started feeling like clarity, because it reminded me of something important. You shouldn't have to fight to become someone's first choice. If someone truly values you, that position is obvious. Looking back now, the hardest part about realizing I was never her first choice wasn't the breakup, it was the lesson. Because it forced me to understand something about relationships that I didn't fully grasp before. Love isn't just about how much you care about someone. It's about whether that care is equally returned. You can be loyal, you can be patient, you can give someone your time, your attention, and your effort. But if the other person hasn't fully chosen you, none of that guarantees they'll stay. And that's a painful truth to learn, but it's also an important one because it changes the way you look at relationships moving forward. It teaches you that being someone's first choice isn't something you should have to earn through constant effort. It should be something they feel naturally, something they decide clearly, something they show through their actions. Because when someone truly chooses you, you won't feel like you're competing with invisible possibilities. You won't feel like their attention could disappear at any moment. You won't feel like you're just temporarily filling a space in their life. You'll feel secure, you'll feel valued, you'll feel chosen, and that's the kind of connection everyone deserves. For a long time I thought realizing I was never her first choice meant I had lost something important, but now I see it differently. What I actually lost was a situation where I was giving my loyalty to someone who had never fully decided they wanted it, and losing that isn't a failure, it's a redirection. Because one day I'll meet someone who doesn't hesitate, someone who doesn't keep looking for alternatives, someone who doesn't treat my presence like something temporary, someone who chooses me without needing time to decide. And when that happens, the difference will be obvious. Because for the first time, I won't feel like I'm trying to become someone's first choice. I'll simply know that I already am. Sometimes I feel like love just isn't meant for me. Not in a dramatic way, not in a woe is me way, just quietly, like I've watched it find everyone else and somehow keep missing me. I've done the work, I've tried to heal, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to love right, and still, nothing sticks. People come close, but never close enough to stay. They show interest, but never intention. I'm always almost chosen, almost loved, almost enough. And after a while, you stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's wrong with you. You start wondering if maybe you're just built differently, if maybe you feel too deeply for a world that loves lightly. I don't think love avoids me because I'm unlovable. I think it avoids me because I don't fit into how people love now. I don't do casual well. I don't know how to care halfway. I don't know how to pretend I wouldn't be hurt if it ended. And that makes people uncomfortable. They like the idea of me. They like the attention. They like being wanted. But when it comes time to choose, to commit, to stay, they hesitate. So I end up alone again. Not because I didn't try, but because I refused to chase what doesn't choose me back. And that's the part no one talks about. Sometimes loving yourself means accepting that love might take longer to find you, or worse, that it might not come at all. And that's a scary thought because I don't want much. I don't want perfection. I don't want fantasy. I just want someone who stays, someone who doesn't get overwhelmed by sincerity, someone who doesn't confuse depth with pressure. But the longer time passes, the quieter that hope gets. Not gone, just tired. I don't hate love. I don't resent it. I'm just starting to wonder if it has a place for me, and if it doesn't, I guess I'll have to learn how to live a full life without it. Not because I stopped believing, but because believing started to hurt more than letting go. It's not even the loneliness that gets me anymore, it's the pattern. How people come into my life with energy and leave with excuses. How they swear they like me, but never enough to stay consistent. Never enough to choose me when it's not convenient. Never enough to make me feel secure. And I'm tired of hearing the same lines in different voices. I'm not ready. I'm focusing on myself. You deserve better. And maybe I do. But why does better never turn into someone who stays? At some point you stop feeling unlucky and start feeling singled out. Like love has an address and somehow it keeps getting my name wrong. I watch people get loved loudly, chosen publicly, protected without asking, and me, I get almost commitment, almost consistency, almost somebody's favorite, and that almost does something to you. It makes you question your personality, your looks, your worth, your timing. Like if you could just fix one thing, love would finally land. But then the quiet truth hits. Love isn't avoiding me because I'm impossible to love. It's avoiding me because I don't accept half love anymore. And that scares people because I don't want casual comfort. I want real intention. I want someone who doesn't disappear when it gets deep. Someone who doesn't treat effort like a favor. Someone who doesn't love me in waves. And if that kind of love doesn't exist for me, then I guess the hardest thing I'll ever do is stop waiting for it to show up. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm tired. After a while, you stop getting excited when someone new shows up. Not because you don't want love, but because you don't trust it to stay. So you hold back without meaning to. You don't open all the way. You don't imagine futures anymore. You don't let yourself get attached too fast, because every time you did before, it ended the same way. Distance, silence, someone slowly pulling away while pretending nothing changed. So now you detach early. Not out of coldness, out of self-defense. You start preparing for the ending before the beginning even settles. You keep one foot out the door because history taught you that staying hopeful hurts more. And the worst part, people feel that. They sense your hesitation, your guardedness, your quiet expectation that this won't last, and they match it. They don't go all in, they don't invest deeply, they keep things light, flexible, undefined, which only confirms what you already believed. Love doesn't choose you fully, so the cycle repeats. You expect love to leave. Love senses you're bracing, no one commits, everyone walks away, and you're left wondering if love avoids you, or if you've learned not to trust it enough to let it stay. That's the cruel part. You didn't become distant because you don't care. You became distant because you cared, and it kept costing you. So now you protect yourself by expecting less, and every time love passes you by, it reinforces the same quiet thought. Maybe love isn't meant to find me. Maybe it's meant to pass through. Eventually, hope stops hurting loudly. It just fades. You don't cry about love anymore. You don't rant about it. You don't even talk about it much. You just stop expecting it. You start telling yourself that maybe love is for other people. People who are easier, people who don't feel as deeply, people who fit better into how relationships work now. And that belief settles in quietly. You still show up. You still try when someone new comes around. But there's a ceiling now. You don't let yourself dream past the present. You don't imagine forever. You don't let excitement get too loud. Because disappointment trained you. You learned that getting your hopes up only makes the fall harder. So you keep them low, manageable, contained. People think you're calm. They think you're chill. They think you're emotionally mature. But really you're just tired of believing in something that keeps proving you wrong. You start romanticizing independence, telling yourself you don't need love anyway, that you're better off alone, that attachment is overrated, and maybe part of that is true. But another part of you still aches when you see people chosen easily, loved openly, protected without asking. You don't envy them. You just wonder why it never seems to be you. And the scariest thought creeps in. What if this isn't a phase? What if this isn't healing? What if this is just acceptance? Acceptance that love won't find you no matter how patient you are, no matter how much you grow, no matter how carefully you love. So you make peace with the idea that maybe love isn't your story, and that peace feels less like relief and more like surrender. At some point, you stop chasing love altogether. Not in a dramatic, I'm done with love way, but in a quiet, tired way. You stop looking for it in rooms, stop expecting it in conversations, stop wondering if this person might finally be different. You still show up, you still talk, you still connect, but the hunger is gone. Not because you're fulfilled, but because you're exhausted. You've wanted love for so long that wanting it started to feel embarrassing. like asking for something that clearly wasn't meant to be yours. So you replace longing with numbness. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't need anyone, that independence is better anyway. And some days you believe it, but other days it feels like you've just buried something alive. You don't get butterflies anymore. You don't get excited about potential. You don't let yourself feel anticipation, because anticipation has disappointed you too many times. People mistake this version of you for healed. They say you're strong. They say you're grounded. They say you've matured. But what they don't see is how much of that softness you had to shut down to survive. You didn't stop wanting love because you outgrew it. You stopped because wanting it started to hurt too much. And now you're in this strange in-between place. Not heartbroken, not hopeful, just waiting without believing. And the thought that scares you the most isn't being alone. I was wondering if you've waited so long that even if love did find you now, you wouldn't know how to let it in. Sometimes the thought hits you that maybe love did try to find you before, and that's harder to sit with than believing it never came at all, because then you have to ask yourself, if you were too hurt to see it, too guarded to trust it, too used to disappointment to believe something good could last, you replay moments differently now. People who tried to get close, but you kept at arm's length. Connections you didn't fully invest in because you were already bracing for the end. Not because they were bad, but because you were tired. Tired of hoping, tired of opening up, tired of being the one who cared more. So you stayed cautious, you stayed reserved, you stayed prepared to lose, and maybe that protection kept you safe, but it also kept you distant. That realization stings because it means love wasn't always the one that failed to show up. Sometimes it showed up quietly and you were too wounded to let it stay. But even knowing that, you don't blame yourself. You were doing what you knew how to do to survive repeated disappointment. You weren't cold, you weren't careless, you were scared to believe again and have it fall apart like it always did. So you chose control over vulnerability, distance over hope, certainty over possibility. And now you're left wondering if love will ever feel safe enough again to recognize when it's real. That question lingers, not loudly, not urgently, just quietly in the back of your mind. At some point, fear quietly replaces hope, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. You stop expecting good things to last. You stop trusting excitement. You stop letting yourself believe that something real could finally choose you. So you protect your heart. At first, it feels smart, responsible, like growth. You don't overshare. You don't get attached too fast. You don't let people see how much you care. But over time, protection turns into distance. You're not just guarding against pain anymore. You're guarding against connection. You start filtering yourself, keeping conversations surface level, holding back emotions before they even have a chance to exist. And people feel that. They don't push deeper, they don't try harder. They assume you're not that interested, which feeds the same belief again. Love doesn't choose you. But what's really happening is that fear is deciding for you. Fear is telling you it's safer not to hope, safer not to want too much, safer not to open the door all the way. Because every time you opened it before, something left. So now you keep it cracked, just enough to say you tried, never enough to risk getting hurt again. And that's the quiet tragedy of it. You didn't stop believing in love because you don't care. You stopped because caring started to feel dangerous, and the longer fear sits in the driver's seat, the harder it becomes to remember what hope even felt like. Eventually you start telling yourself you're better off alone, not because you don't want love, but because wanting it feels pointless. You say things like, I'm used to being by myself, I don't need anyone, I'm fine the way I am. And part of that is true, you're strong on your own. You have learned how to survive without being chosen. You can build a life that doesn't depend on someone staying. But there's another part you don't talk about. The part that still wants to be seen. The part that still wants someone to stay without being asked. The part that wonders what it would feel like to finally be someone's first choice. So you compromise with yourself. You don't hope, but you don't fully let go either. You live in this middle space where love is something other people get, and you quietly prepare for a life without it. You stop imagining shared futures. You stop picturing growing old with someone. You plan your life around independence because that's the only constant you trust. And people admire you for it. They call you self-sufficient. They say you're unbothered. They think you're healed. But healing isn't supposed to feel like convincing yourself you don't want something you still ache for. You didn't choose solitude because it fulfilled you. You chose it because disappointment taught you not to expect more. And the scariest part, the longer you live like this, the more normal it feels. Love stops feeling like something missing and starts feeling like something unrealistic. And that's when you wonder if love didn't avoid you at all. If you just slowly stop believing you were allowed to have it. The truth is, you never stopped wanting love. You just stopped admitting it. You tell yourself you're fine alone, that you've outgrown the need for romance, that you're focused on yourself now. But late at night, when everything's quiet, that truth shows up. You still imagine being chosen, still wonder what it would feel like to be someone's safe place, still crave a love that doesn't hesitate. You just don't say it out loud anymore. Because admitting you still want love feels dangerous. It feels like setting yourself up for disappointment again. Like reopening a door you worked so hard to close, so you downplay it, you joke about it, you bury it under independence and self-control. But wanting love never made you weak. Being hurt just taught you to hide that want better. You learned how to survive without being chosen, but survival was never the same as fulfillment, and deep down you know the difference. You didn't stop believing in love because you healed. You stopped because believing started to feel like self-betrayal, like hoping for something that never came was making a fool of you. So you chose silence instead. But that silence doesn't mean you're done wanting love. It just means you're tired of wanting it alone. At some point, you have to face the question you've been avoiding this whole time. Is love really done with you, or are you done believing in it? Because the truth is, love didn't disappear overnight. It faded every time you were disappointed, every time someone almost chose you, every time you opened up and watched it fall apart again. Eventually, believing started to feel stupid, like hoping for something that clearly wasn't meant for you. So you stopped. Not because you stopped wanting love, but because you couldn't handle wanting it alone anymore. You told yourself this is just how life turned out, that some people get love and others learn how to live without it, and maybe that belief protected you. It kept you from more heartbreak, more waiting, more letting yourself down, but it also cost you something. It cost you the ability to imagine a future that includes being chosen. It cost you the courage to believe something good could stay. So now you stand here, not hopeless, not hopeful, just tired of wondering, tired of preparing for disappointment, tired of asking why love keeps missing you. And maybe the hardest truth is this: love didn't stop trying to find you. You just stopped leaving the door open, not because you're broken, not because you're unlovable, but because getting your hopes up hurt more than letting them go. And whether love ever finds you or not, one thing is clear now. You didn't lose because you loved too much. You lost because loving started to feel unsafe. So if love ever does come again, it won't be loud, it won't rush you, it won't demand you believe right away. It'll wait. And the real question won't be whether love finds you. It'll be whether you're willing to believe again when it does. Unrequited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain, but unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling, even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it. So you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more, why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. A long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked, because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is, and every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance, you realize you're giving more than you're receiving, and then emotionally, mentally, quietly, you're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently. Not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question: if nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety, that love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you, it isn't supposed to make you feel invisible, it isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth, and realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Should I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief, sometimes growth feels like loss, sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait, but guilt doesn't mean you're wrong, it just means you cared deeply, and caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness. You miss the routine. You even miss the hope, as painful as it was. And that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day, someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. I'm romantic. I believe in effort, in choosing someone daily, in love that feels intentional, not accidental. But I'm not naive anymore. I don't confuse chemistry with commitment. I don't mistake words for consistency. I don't fall in love with potential and ignore reality to protect the fantasy. That version of me is gone. Being romantic doesn't mean I overlook red flags. It doesn't mean I excuse disrespect. It doesn't mean I stay just because I feel deeply. It means I love with awareness now. I still want connection, still want intimacy, still want something real, but I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my peace just to keep a feeling alive. I know the difference now between someone who feels good and someone who is good for me. I know the difference between affection and effort, between attention and intention, And I don't chase illusions anymore. I won't romanticize someone who can't show up consistently. I won't soften the truth to protect a story I wanted to believe in. I can be tender and still have boundaries, hopeful and still realistic. Romantic doesn't mean blind. It means I care deeply, but I pay attention. And this time I don't fall in love at the expense of myself. I used to think being romantic meant enduring, staying longer than I should, giving the benefit of the doubt even when doubt was all I felt, believing that love meant patience no matter the cost. That's where it went wrong. I mistook tolerance for depth. I confused hope with commitment. I kept softening my boundaries to protect a version of love that wasn't protecting me. That wasn't romance, that was self-abandonment. Being romantic doesn't mean I ignore patterns. It doesn't mean I wait for someone to become who they promise to be. It means I listen when actions contradict words. It means I leave when effort fades. It means I don't negotiate respect just to keep a connection alive. I still believe in love that's big, in feelings that are deep, in choosing someone with intention. But now, romance has standards. I won't pour into uncertainty. I won't romanticize inconsistency. I won't stay where I feel anxious and call it passion. Romantic love should feel safe enough to be honest, stable enough to be real, mutual enough to last, and if it isn't, I don't try to fix it anymore. Because I can be romantic without being reckless with my heart. Being romantic but not naive changes how you choose people from the very beginning. You don't rush connection anymore. You don't get swept up by intensity. You don't confuse attention with alignment. You let things unfold. You watch how someone shows up when it's inconvenient, how they communicate when things are unclear, how they act when they don't get their way. Because attraction is easy, consistency is not. You stop falling for the idea of someone and start paying attention to how they actually treat you. Do they follow through? Do they respect your time? Do they show curiosity about your inner world? Or just enjoy how you make them feel? Being romantic doesn't mean you stop feeling sparks. It means sparks aren't enough anymore. You want safety with the spark, effort with the chemistry, clarity with the feelings, so you slow down, not because you're scared, but because you value yourself too much to rush into something unproven. You let people reveal who they are without trying to fill in the gaps for them. And if something feels off, you don't romanticize it. You listen, because the right connection won't need you to ignore yourself to keep it alive. Being romantic without being naive means I still believe in love. I just don't chase it blindly anymore. I don't force connections. I don't convince people to choose me. I don't stay where effort feels one-sided and call it patience. I let love meet me where I am. If someone wants me, I won't have to guess. If someone cares, I won't have to ask repeatedly. If something is real, it won't require me to ignore my instincts. I still believe in late-night talks, in choosing each other, in building something meaningful, but I don't sacrifice clarity for intensity anymore. I've learned that love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure. It's proven by how safe you feel being yourself without shrinking, performing, or waiting. So now I don't rush toward feelings just because they're strong. I let actions catch up to words. I let time reveal truth. I let consistency do the convincing. And if someone can't meet me there, I don't make it mean love is dead. I just understand that not every connection is meant to last. I can still be soft, still hopeful, still romantic. I'm just no longer willing to lose myself for the sake of a feeling. Being romantic, not naive, changed what I tolerate. I don't excuse inconsistency anymore. I don't sit with confusion and call it giving things time. I don't ignore the feeling that something is off just because I want it to work. Before, I'd stay and explain. I'd adjust. I'd wait. Now, I observe. If effort fades, I notice. If respect slips, I address it once. If nothing changes, I leave. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. I don't feel guilty walking away from things that don't align anymore, because walking away isn't punishment, it's protection. I used to think romance meant holding on. Now I know it also means knowing when to let go. I still care deeply, still feel intensely, still believe in choosing someone with intention, but I won't romanticize potential at the expense of reality. I won't stay where I feel anxious, unseen, or unsure of my place. Romance without boundaries is just hope with no direction. And now, my heart has standards, not walls, standards. Being romantic and grounded makes love feel quieter than I expected. There's no chaos, no guessing games, no emotional roller coaster disguised as passion. And at first that felt strange. I was used to intensity proving something, used to anxiety meaning I cared, used to confusion keeping me invested. But that wasn't depth, that was instability. Now, romance feels calm. It looks like consistency. It sounds like clear communication. It feels like not having to overthink where I stand. There's still excitement. It's just not fueled by uncertainty. I don't need constant reassurance anymore. I don't need dramatic gesture to feel chosen. I don't need to be chased to feel wanted. Because when something is real, it doesn't keep you on edge. Being romantic doesn't mean I crave fireworks every moment. It means I value safety with the spark, peace with the passion, connection that doesn't cost me my balance. And the biggest shift, I don't mistake calm for boredom anymore. I understand now that love doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most romantic thing is feeling secure enough to just be yourself. Being romantic, not naive, changed how I communicate my needs. I don't hint anymore. I don't water things down to avoid being too much. I don't stay silent hoping someone will just figure it out. I say what I need, not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly, because needing clarity isn't pressure. Needing consistency isn't insecurity. Needing effort isn't asking for the world, it's asking for alignment. Before, I was scared that speaking up would push people away, that if I asked for more, I'd lose what I had. Now I understand something important. If honesty scares someone off, they were never meant to stay. I don't over-explain myself anymore. I don't apologize for having standards. I don't negotiate my needs to make someone comfortable. Romance doesn't mean silence. It means trusting that the right person won't feel threatened by clear communication. They won't call it drama. They won't call it too much. They won't make you feel guilty for wanting to feel secure. They'll listen, they'll respond, they'll meet you where you are. And if they don't, I don't take it personally, because being romantic, not naive, means I'd rather be understood slowly than misunderstood forever. Being romantic with boundaries filters people out quietly. You don't have to test anyone, you don't have to interrogate intentions, you don't have to force clarity. You just stay consistent with who you are, you show up honestly, you communicate clearly. You don't overgive to keep someone interested, and that alone does the work. People who only wanted attention get bored. People who thrived on ambiguity get uncomfortable. People who wanted access without effort slowly fade, and you let them, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped chasing. Being romantic, not naive, means you don't audition for love anymore. You don't prove your worth. You don't compete for consistency. You don't bend yourself to be easier to choose. You let people meet you where you stand, and the ones who can't, they remove themselves. That used to scare you. Now it reassures you, because the right connection won't need you to lower your standards to keep it alive. It will rise to meet them. And the most romantic thing about that, you don't have to lose yourself to find love anymore. I still believe in love. That part never left. What changed is who I trust first. I believe in myself now. I trust my intuition when something feels off. I trust my boundaries when they need to be held. I trust my heart without handing it over blindly. Before, I believed love required risk at any cost, that you had to jump first and hope someone caught you. Now I know better. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't punish you for being honest. It doesn't require you to doubt your worth to keep it alive. Being romantic, not naive, means I still dream. I just don't disappear into the dream. I don't ignore red flags to protect the fantasy. I don't silence my needs to keep someone comfortable. I don't romanticize suffering and call it devotion. I let love add to my life, not destabilize it. And the biggest shift of all, I don't fear losing love anymore the way I used to, because I know I won't lose myself trying to keep it. That confidence didn't come from love finding me. It came from me finally standing with myself. Being romantic, not naive, means I didn't lose my softness. I refined it. I still believe in love that's intentional, in effort that's mutual, in choosing someone without hesitation or games, but I no longer confuse love with endurance. I won't stay where I feel uncertain. I won't fight for clarity. I won't romanticize someone's potential while ignoring how they treat me now. Romance isn't blind faith anymore. It's awareness. It's knowing that feelings matter, but actions matter more. That chemistry is exciting, but consistency is what lasts. That love shouldn't cost you your peace, your voice, or yourself. I still want something real. I still want depth. I still want connection that feels meaningful. I just won't abandon myself to get it. If someone meets me with honesty, I open my heart. If they meet me with effort, I lean in. If they meet me halfway, I walk the rest with them. And if they don't, I don't force it. I don't chase it. I don't grieve what was never aligned. Because being romantic doesn't mean I accept less. It means I know exactly what kind of love I want. And I'm patient enough to wait for something that doesn't ask me to be smaller, quieter, or less aware. I'm still a romantic. I just finally learned how to protect my heart without closing it. And that's the difference. They say your second love hits the deepest. And at first I didn't believe that. I thought nothing could touch the intensity of the first one. First love is loud. It's reckless. It's the kind of love that makes you believe everything will work out just because you feel it so strongly. You fall without thinking. You trust without fear. You don't even know what heartbreak really is yet, so you give everything freely. But the second love comes after reality has already introduced itself. It comes after disappointment, after the nights where you questioned your worth, after you learned that love doesn't always stay no matter how hard you try. So this time, you don't rush, you don't dive in head first, you hesitate, you analyze, you protect your heart like it's something fragile, because now you know it is, and that's what makes the second love different. You don't love blindly anymore, you love intentionally, you pay attention to effort, to consistency, to how someone treats you when it's inconvenient, not just when it's easy. You're still scared, but you're braver in a quieter way. You open up slowly, piece by piece, hoping you won't regret it again. And somehow, it still means more than you expected, because after being broken once, feeling safe again hits different. Feeling chosen without having to beg hits different. Being loved without chaos feels almost unfamiliar at first. You keep waiting for the catch. For the moment it all falls apart, but it doesn't, at least not right away. The second love isn't about butterflies in your stomach. It's about calm in your chest. It's about being understood without having to explain yourself over and over. It's about not feeling anxious when your phone is quiet. It's about knowing where you stand. It's about realizing that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. And even if the second love doesn't last forever, it leaves a different kind of mark. It teaches you what love is supposed to feel like. It shows you that you can love deeply without losing yourself, that you can stay soft without being naive, that healing doesn't mean closing your heart, it means choosing better. Your first love changes you, but your second love reminds you why you didn't give up on love in the first place. And that's why it hurts deeper, because this time you knew what you were risking and you loved anyway. What people don't tell you is that the second love doesn't just affect your heart, it reshapes the way you see everything. You're not the same person you were the first time you fell in love. You're more aware now, more cautious. You've seen how quickly things can change, how someone can promise forever and still walk away. So you love with your eyes open this time. You notice the small things, the tone shifts, the effort levels, the moments where silence says more than words ever could. You're not naive anymore, but you're not closed off either. And that's the dangerous balance, because part of you is still hopeful, still wanting to believe that this time will be different, that maybe this love will be the one that stays. And because you're loving with intention now, when it starts starts to slip, you feel it immediately. The second love hurts because you don't get blindsided. You see it coming. You sense the distance before it's spoken. You feel the warmth fade before it's gone. You recognize the patterns because you've lived them before, and yet you still stay longer than you should. Not because you're desperate, but because you understand love better now. You know relationships aren't perfect. You know people struggle. You try to be patient. You try to communicate. You try to fix instead of flee. That's what makes it cut deeper when it ends. Because you didn't love blindly. You loved consciously. You loved knowing the risk. The second love doesn't shatter you the way the first one does. It doesn't leave you confused about what went wrong. Instead, it leaves you quietly exhausted. You don't cry as loudly. You don't fall apart as dramatically. You just sit with this heavy realization that sometimes, even when you do things the right way, love can still end. And that's a different kind of pain. It's the pain of knowing you grew, healed, and tried again, and still didn't get the ending you hoped for. But it's also the pain that proves how strong you've become, because even after everything, you are still capable of opening your heart again. That matters more than you think. The second love stays with you in quieter ways, not as chaos, not as obsession, but as reflection. It makes you look at yourself differently, at the way you love, at the boundaries you set, at the parts of you that grew stronger and the parts that are still tender. You don't replay every moment wondering what you did wrong like the first time. Instead, you replay moments wondering how something that felt so healthy could still slip through your fingers. And that's when it hits you. Love isn't a guarantee. Effort doesn't come with insurance. Doing your best doesn't mean you'll always get to keep what you care about. That realization hurts, but it also matures you. You stop romanticizing pain. You stop thinking love has to be hard to be meaningful. You stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are. The second love teaches you discernment. It teaches you that chemistry isn't enough, that timing matters, that two good people can still be wrong for each other in that moment of life. And accepting that is one of the hardest lessons there is. You don't come out of it bitter, at least not if you're honest with yourself. You come out clearer. You know what you want now, what you won't tolerate, what you deserve without needing to explain it to anyone. And even though it didn't last, it didn't fail, it served its purpose. It showed you that love can feel safe, that connection can be calm, that you don't have to lose yourself to be close to someone. The second love doesn't destroy your belief in love, it refines it. It strips away the fantasy and leaves you with truth. And truth, even when it hurts, is always better than illusion. Because now, when love comes again, and it will, you won't be chasing it, you'll be choosing it. What makes the second love linger is how close it came to being right. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't built on illusion. It felt grounded, like something you could grow into, instead of something you were chasing. And that's why letting it go feels so unfair. You did the work this time. You showed up differently. You loved with awareness, and still it slipped away. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You start asking quieter questions. Not why wasn't I enough, but why wasn't this the right time? You realize that love isn't just about effort or intention. It's also about alignment. About two people being ready in the same season of life. And sometimes, no matter how real it feels, the timing just isn't there. The second love teaches you that endings don't always come from betrayal or lack of care. Sometimes they come from growth pulling people in different directions. From life demanding things one person is ready to give and the other isn't yet. And that kind of ending hurts because there's no villain to blame. You don't leave angry, you leave understanding, and that understanding weighs heavy. But here's the quiet truth. The second love doesn't close your heart, it strengthens it. It proves you're capable of loving again without losing yourself. It shows you that healing worked, that you didn't harden, that you didn't shut down. You took the risk again, knowing how badly it could hurt, and that courage matters because love isn't measured by how long it lasts. It's measured by how honestly it's given, and the second love is often the most honest version of you. Not perfect, not fearless, but real, and that's something no ending can take away. The second love changes how you carry yourself afterward. You don't walk away shattered, but you don't walk away untouched either. There's a quiet shift in you. You become softer in some places, stronger in others. You learn how to sit with loss without letting it turn into bitterness, and that balance takes time. You notice how you move differently now. You're slower to give access to your heart, but not closed. You're more honest about what you need, even if it risks someone leaving. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace, because the second love taught you that losing yourself slowly is worse than losing someone quickly. You also learn that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance, from realizing that you gave what you could with what you knew at the time, that both of you tried in the ways you knew how, and that an ending doesn't erase the good that existed. The memories don't hurt the same way anymore. They don't stab, they ache, and even that ache becomes familiar, manageable. It reminds you that you once felt safe with someone, and that means you can feel that way again. Maybe not with them, but with someone else, someday. The second love doesn't leave you afraid to love again. It leaves you prepared. You know what to look for now. You know the difference between attention and effort, between chemistry and compatibility, between wanting someone and being ready to build with them. And when love finds you again, because it will, you won't be chasing the feeling. You'll be recognizing calm, mutual, grounded, something that doesn't ask you to prove your worth or question your place. That's the quiet gift of the second love. It doesn't stay forever, but it stays with you in the way you love next. There's a moment after the second love ends where you realize you're not angry anymore. Not at them, not even at yourself. You're just tired. Tired in a way that only comes from caring deeply and trying your best. And that tiredness forces you to slow down and actually listen to yourself. You start asking different questions now. Not, how do I get them back? But why did I stay when I felt myself shrinking? You become more aware of the moments you ignored your intuition, the times your body knew before your heart was ready to admit it. And instead of beating yourself up for it, you start forgiving yourself for being human. The second love teaches you that loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. That compromise shouldn't feel like self-erasure. That consistency matters more than intensity. And that someone can care about you deeply and still not be capable of loving you in the way you need. You also realize something else that's important. Just because a love ends doesn't mean it failed. Some connections are meant to show you a version of yourself you didn't know existed, a braver version, a more open version, a version that learned how to communicate, how to trust again, how to be vulnerable without losing control. And that version of you doesn't disappear when the relationship ends, it stays. You carry it into every interaction after, into the boundaries you set, into the standards you keep, into the way you walk away sooner when something doesn't feel right instead of forcing yourself to stay. The second love doesn't break you, it refines you. It teaches you how to love without fantasy, without desperation, without fear running the show. And even though it didn't last, it proves something important, that you're capable of loving in a healthy way. And once you know that, you never really lose. After the second love, you stop romanticizing ending. You understand that sometimes things don't fall apart loudly. They fade, they change shape. They quietly reach a point where staying would mean forcing something that's no longer aligned. And accepting that takes more strength than holding on ever did. You learn how to grieve without dramatizing. You let yourself miss them without wishing to undo the ending. You don't demonize what you adjust to make letting go easier. You honor it for what it was, meaningful, imperfect, and real. That kind of honesty with yourself is growth. You also become more intentional with your energy. You don't over-explain your feelings to people who aren't listening. You don't overextend yourself to prove your worth. You save your softness for those who handle it with care. Because the second love taught you how valuable that softness actually is. And slowly, without forcing it, you start to feel whole again. Not because someone replaced them, but because you learned how to stand on your own with everything you gained from loving. You realize that love didn't take anything from you. It gave you clarity, depth, emotional intelligence you didn't have before. The second love doesn't leave you empty, it leaves you wiser. You understand now that love isn't about avoiding pain, it's about choosing something real, knowing it could hurt, and still showing up with honesty. And when you're able to do that without losing yourself, that's when love becomes something powerful instead of fragile. You're not the same person you were before them. You're better prepared for what comes next. The second love stays with you not as pain, but as proof that your heart didn't close after being hurt. Proof that you didn't let fear turn you cold. Proof that even after disappointment, you were still willing to try again. And that matters more than whether it lasts, because the goal was never to avoid heartbreak forever. The goal was to love without losing yourself. And the second love showed you that you could be open without being reckless, vulnerable without being naive. You learned how to love with balance, and one day when love comes again, you'll feel the difference immediately. It won't feel rushed, it won't feel heavy, it won't feel like you're walking on eggshells or trying to prove your value. It'll feel mutual, steady, easy in a way that doesn't scare you. You won't be chasing a feeling anymore. You'll be choosing a person, and that's the quiet beauty of the second. It doesn't promise forever, it prepares you. It teaches you that love doesn't need to hurt to be meaningful, and that peace is just as powerful as passion. So if your second love didn't last, don't mourn it like a failure. See it for what it really was. A turning point, a lesson, a reminder that your heart is still capable of real connection. The first love opens your heart. The second love teaches it how to stay open. And whatever comes next, you'll be ready. She said I wasn't man enough, and I won't lie. That one stuck, not because I believe it, but because when someone you love questions your masculinity, it hits somewhere deeper than regular criticism. It's not just about behavior, it's identity. It's everything you thought you were doing right suddenly being reframed as weakness. What does man enough even mean? Because I showed up, I communicated, I stayed loyal, I tried to fix things instead of run from them. But apparently that wasn't enough. Apparently being calm instead of aggressive was a problem. Apparently wanting to talk things through instead of shutting down made me soft. Apparently expressing emotion made me less of a man. And that's when I realized something dangerous. Some people confuse masculinity with dominance. They confuse emotional control with emotional absence. They confuse stability with weakness. And if that's the definition she was using, then maybe I was never supposed to fit it. But still, when she said it, it made me question myself. Because no matter how confident you are, words like that linger. They make you replay moments. They make you wonder if you should have been tougher, colder, less available, less understanding. And that's how toxic standards start reshaping you quietly. I started analyzing everything after that. Was I too patient, too willing to compromise, too quick to apologize? Because I thought being a man meant being responsible, being accountable, being emotionally mature. But maybe she wanted something louder, more dominant, more unpredictable, and that's confusing because society tells men two opposite things. Be strong, but don't be cold. Be vulnerable, but don't be weak. Lead, but don't control. And somehow you're supposed to balance all of it perfectly. So when she said I wasn't man enough, I started wondering, was I too emotionally available? Was I too steady? Was I not exciting enough? But here's the truth that took me time to accept. Being consistent doesn't make you less of a man. Being calm doesn't make you less masculine. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't make you weak. It makes you evolved. And not everyone is comfortable with evolved. Some people are used to chaos, used to intensity, used to men who are hard to access emotionally. So when they meet someone who communicates clearly and stands firm without yelling, it feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar can feel unmanly to someone who's been conditioned differently. But that's not my problem to fix. The deeper issue wasn't her words. It was what they tried to take from me. My confidence, because when someone attacks your masculinity, they're attacking your foundation. They're saying you're not enough as you are, and that's heavy. But here's what I had to learn. being man enough means being emotionally unavailable, if it means suppressing how I feel, if it means pretending I don't care, if it means dominating instead of communicating, then I don't want that version of masculinity, because strength isn't loud. It's controlled, it's stable, it's secure enough to not overreact. It's confident enough to not prove itself constantly. And maybe she mistook calm for weak. Maybe she mistook kindness for softness. Maybe she mistook emotional awareness for insecurity. But that doesn't redefine me, it just shows what she was used to. What hurt the most wasn't that she left, it was that she framed it like I lacked something, like I needed to become more, like I needed to step up into some undefined standard. But love isn't about becoming someone else to fit someone's idea of masculinity. It's about alignment. If she needed someone louder, more dominant, more emotionally distant, that's preference, not proof that I wasn't enough. Wasn't. Because being man enough shouldn't mean performing toughness. It should mean integrity, leadership, emotional control, responsibility, and I had all of that, just not in a way that matched her expectations, and that's okay. I realized something important after sitting with it. The right woman won't question your masculinity. She'll feel safe in it. She won't need you to be aggressive to feel protected. She won't need you to be emotionally shut down to feel secure. She won't test your dominance to measure your worth. She'll recognize strength in stability. She'll see leadership in accountability. She'll see masculinity in consistency, because real masculinity isn't about intimidation, it's about presence. It's about knowing who you are without needing to prove it constantly. And here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes when someone says you're not man enough, what they really mean is you're not toxic enough for what I'm used to. Because chaos feels passionate to some people, silence feels strong to some people, emotional distance feels masculine to some people, but healthy masculinity feels boring if you're addicted to instability, and that's not an insult, it's reality. Some people equate unpredictability with strength, and when they meet steadiness, they don't know what to do with it. I had to ask myself something hard. Was I actually lacking, or was I just not performing? Because there's a difference. Lacking means I don't possess something. Performing means I'm pretending to, and I refuse to perform masculinity for approval. I refuse to become colder just to seem stronger. I refuse to suppress my emotional intelligence just to look dominant, because the right person won't require that. They'll appreciate it. If anything, being called not man enough forced me to define what that means for myself. To me, being a man means standing on your word, protecting without controlling, communicating without yelling, being emotionally disciplined, owning your mistakes, leading with stability, and I did all of that. So if that wasn't enough for her, it doesn't mean I failed. It means we defined strength differently. I won't let one person's perception reshape my identity, because masculinity isn't loud. It isn't about dominance. It isn't about intimidation. It's about internal control. It's about consistency. It's about knowing who you are when no one is watching. And if someone mistakes calm strength for weakness, that says more about what they're used to than what I am. She said I wasn't man enough, but I am man enough to walk away instead of yelling, stay calm instead of escalating, express how I feel instead of suppressing it, choose growth instead of ego. And that's the kind of man I'll stay, because the right woman won't need me to prove my masculinity. She'll feel secure in it, and I'd rather be steady and misunderstood than loud and respected for something I'm not. If being man enough means losing emotional depth, then I'll pass. Because real strength doesn't shout, it stands. She said she needed space, and I believed her, because when someone says that, you don't question it, you respect it, you tell yourself they're overwhelmed, they're figuring things out, they just need time to clear their head. So I gave her that. I didn't chase, I didn't pressure her, I didn't try to force conversations that she clearly wasn't ready to have. I stepped back, because in my head, that's what you do when you care about someone. You don't make things harder for them, you give them room. But what I didn't realize at the time was this: she didn't need space, she just didn't want me. At first I handled it the way you're supposed to. I gave her distance. I stopped texting first. I stopped trying to keep conversations alive. I let the silence sit even when it didn't feel right, because I thought space meant something temporary, like a pause, like something we would come back from. But the silence started stretching longer than it should have, and instead of clarity, it just created confusion. Because when someone genuinely needs space, they don't disappear without direction. They don't leave you guessing. They don't make you feel like you're suddenly a stranger. But that's exactly how it started to feel. And deep down, something didn't sit right. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the energy didn't match what she said. Then little things started adding up. Things I didn't notice right away. But once I did, I couldn't ignore them. She wasn't just taking space. She was still active, still talking, still posting, still present, just not with me. And that's when the confusion turned into something else, clarity. Because space doesn't mean disappearing from one person while still being available for everything else. Space doesn't look like selective silence. And that's when it hit me. She didn't need space from everything. She needed space from me. That realization is different, because now it's not about understanding, it's about acceptance. You start replaying everything, trying to figure out when it changed, when her energy shifted, when the connection stopped being something she wanted to maintain. Because if it was really about space, she would have come back, she would have explained, she would have made it clear where things stood, but she didn't. She just faded and let the silence say what she didn't want to say directly. And the truth is, space is one of the easiest ways to leave without saying you're leaving. It sounds soft, it sounds understandable, it doesn't create conflict, but sometimes it's just distance in disguise, a way to slowly step out without having to take responsibility for ending it. And I didn't want to see it like that at first, because believing her felt easier than accepting what was actually happening. Because if I accepted it, then I had to admit something I wasn't ready for, that I wasn't someone she was trying to hold on to. I was someone she was slowly letting go of. And that's a different kind of pain, because it's quiet. There's no argument, no clear ending, just distance that keeps growing until you finally understand what it means. For a while I kept thinking she'd come back, that once she had her space, things would go back to how they were, because when something feels real, you don't expect it to end like that. You expect a conversation, closure, something, but sometimes the absence is the answer. And that's what I had to learn the hard way. And once I stopped waiting, everything started making more sense, because I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't questioning where I stood. I wasn't trying to interpret silence. I just saw it for what it was. She didn't need time. She made a decision, just not one she wanted to say out loud. And yeah, that hurts, not just because she left, but because of how she did it. Because honesty would have been easier to respect, clarity would have been easier to accept, but instead, I was left trying to understand something that was never explained, and that kind of ending stays with you for a while. So yeah, she said she needed space, but what she really needed was distance from me, and now I understand something clearly. The right person doesn't disappear to figure out if they want you. They don't leave you in silence, they don't make you question everything. They communicate, they stay, they choose. So next time, I won't confuse silence with patience. I won't wait around for someone who already stepped away, because when someone truly wants you, they don't need space to decide it. There wasn't a big moment, no argument, no dramatic ending, no clear, this is over. That's what made it worse, because the moment I realized she stopped loving me was quiet. It was in the way she talked to me, the way her voice didn't carry the same feeling anymore, the way everything sounded the same but felt different. And that's when it hit me. Nothing happened, but everything changed. At first I tried to ignore it, because when something shifts like that, your first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to explain it. Maybe she's just tired. Maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs time. So I kept talking to her like nothing changed. Like if I stayed the same, things would go back to how they were, but they didn't. The conversations were still there, but the feeling wasn't. She still replied, still answered, still kept things going just enough, but something was missing. That energy, that warmth, that feeling like she actually wanted to be there, and you can feel that difference even if you don't want to admit it. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Shorter replies, less emotion, less effort to keep things alive, like I was someone she talked to, not someone she was connected to. And that's when it started sinking in, because love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're the only one still holding on to what it used to be. And that realization hits in the smallest moments. A dry reply, a delayed answer, a conversation that used to flow that now feeling forced. I kept thinking it would come back, that maybe it was just a phase, that maybe I just needed to be more patient, so I stayed. I kept showing up the same way, hoping she'd meet me there again, but she didn't, and that's when it finally clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization. I'm still here, but she's not really. Not in the way she used to be. That's the hardest kind of ending. Because nothing officially ended, there's no clear moment to point at. Just a slow shift until you're standing in something that looks the same, but doesn't feel the same at all. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. You can try to ignore it, try to convince yourself it's temporary, but deep down, you know, something changed, and it's not coming back. The moment I realized she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped feeling loved by her. No words, no explanation, just a feeling that wasn't there anymore. And now I understand something clearly. Love doesn't just live in words, it lives in effort, in presence, in consistency. And when those disappear, the feeling follows. That was the moment, not loud, not obvious, just real. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind. Because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up. The thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m. The fears you laugh off so nobody worries. The way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing. And for a minute, it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing. Like they actually know, and that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight, no goodbye that matches how close it felt, no ending that makes sense, just nothing, and that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run. Because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone, so your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, yeah, next time don't say so much. Next time don't get attached. Next time stay surface level, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking, not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You You start noticing patterns everywhere, a slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything. Because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does, so you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore, you hold back details, you soften your honesty, you keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present, but there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them, and you hate that because you remember how it felt before, how natural it was to let someone know you, how easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud, you just feel them, and slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature, when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth. Trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much. They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness. You just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth, and then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore, why being around people still feels lonely. It's because you didn't heal. You adapted, you learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you fully. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you. It just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same. But it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic. And the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet. To someone who avoids their own emotions, your honesty feels like pressure, your awareness feels like exposure, your care feels like responsibility. So they leave. Not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for. And that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity, that's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, they label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming, I should have known better, I should have protected myself. But that's not growth, that's blame dressed up as reflection. You didn't fail by trusting, you didn't mess up by being open, you didn't lose because you cared, you just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself, and slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential. You misjudge their capacity? Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less, it's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky, not because you don't want connection to but because you don't want to disappear inside it. You move slower this time, not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow-through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over-explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear. Instead of communicate, that's not walls, that's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed. And for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection. Not constant intensity, just consistency, and that's how you know. Because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept. And you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind. Because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up, the thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m., the fears you laugh off so nobody worries, the way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing, and for a minute it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing, like they actually know. And that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight, no goodbye that matches how close it felt. No ending that makes sense, just nothing. And that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run. Because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone. So your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, Next time, don't say so much. Next time, don't get attached. Next time, stay surface level. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking, not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You start noticing patterns everywhere. A slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything, because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does. So you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore. You hold back details. You soften your honesty. You keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present, but there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them. And you hate that because you remember how it felt before, how natural it was to let someone know you, how easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud. You just feel them. And slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth. Trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much. They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness, you just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth. And then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore, why being around people still feels lonely. It's because you didn't heal, you adapt. You learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you, it just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same, but it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic, and the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet, to someone who avoids their own emotions. Your honesty feels like pressure. Your awareness feels like exposure. Your care feels like responsibility. So they leave, not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for. And that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity. That's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, they label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming. I should have known better. I should have protected myself. But that's not growth. That's blame dressed up as reflection. You You didn't fail by trusting. You didn't mess up by being open. You didn't lose because you cared. You just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself, and slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential, you misjudged their capacity. Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less, it's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky. Not because you don't want connection, but because you don't want to disappear inside it, so you move slower this time, not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear. Instead of communicate. That's not walls, that's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed, and for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection, not constant intensity, just consistency. And that's how you know. Because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept, and you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. We all know that one friend who's genuinely a good guy. Not the fake nice kind. Not the kind that's only good when it benefits him. I mean the real kind. The one who listens more than he talks. The one who checks in just because. The one who walks her home, texts, "Let me know when you get there," and actually waits for the reply. Not for points, not for validation. Just because that's who he is. He shows up when people call. He remembers small details. He gives effort without keeping score. And somehow, he's always the one that gets hurt. Girls say they want a good guy. They say they're tired of games, tired of being treated wrong. But when a good guy actually shows up, he gets pushed to the side, kept around just in case, treated like an option instead of a choice. He gets left on red, gets mixed signals, gets told, "You're amazing, just not right now." And then one day, he watches her choose someone who won't even do half of what he did. And the worst part? He doesn't complain about it, he jokes it off, acts like it doesn't bother him, plays it cool. But if you're paying attention, you see the change. He laughs less, questions himself more, starts wondering if being genuine is the problem. If caring too much makes him weak, if being a good guy even matters anymore, so he hardens a little, pulls back, stops giving as freely, not because he wants to be cold but because the world keeps teaching him that softness gets punished. It reminds me of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. Gentle, compassionate, kind even to people who don't deserve it. People mistake that kindness for weakness until they realize how much strength it actually takes to stay good in a cruel world. That's the truth people forget. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't dominate. It doesn't need to prove itself. Real strength is staying kind when life gives you every reason not to be. So if you know a guy like that, be there for him. Remind him that his heart isn't a flaw, that being good isn't something he needs to outgrow, because one day someone is going to see him, really see him, and they won't make him pay for the damage done by people who couldn't handle his heart. And when that happens, being a good guy will finally feel worth it. What people don't realize is how early the good guy starts changing himself without even noticing. At first it's small, he replies a little slower, he stops double texting, he thinks twice before doing something thoughtful because he's scared it'll be taken the wrong way, not appreciated, or worse, ignored. He starts asking himself questions he never used to ask. Am I doing too much? Should I care less? Why do I always end up like this? And that's dangerous, because now he's learning to dull the very traits that made him special. The world doesn't break good guys all at once. It chips away at him slowly. Every time his effort isn't matched, every time his loyalty is taken for granted, every time he's told he's perfect but still not chosen. Eventually he starts building walls, not because he wants to play games, but because he's tired of being the only one who loses when he plays fair. He watches people who treat others poorly get rewarded with attention, love, and chances, and he wonders what he's doing wrong for choosing empathy instead of ego. But here's what nobody tells him. Being a good guy isn't about what you receive immediately, it's about who you become long-term. Patience he has, the emotional awareness, the ability to love deeply without needing control. Those qualities don't disappear just because they've been overlooked. They mature, and when the right person finally comes along, those same traits won't feel like a burden. They'll feel like safety, like home, like something rare in a world full of half-effort and emotional detachment. The good guy doesn't lose. He just waits longer for the right win. There's also something else the good guy carries that no one talks about. Guilt. Guilt for feeling angry when he's treated unfairly. Guilt for wanting to pull away. Guilt for even questioning whether being kind is worth it anymore. Because deep down, he doesn't want to become someone he wouldn't recognize. So instead of expressing that frustration, he swallows it. He tells himself to be patient, to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they've shown him who they are multiple times. And that self-control, that restraint, it takes more strength than most people will ever realize, but it comes at a cost. He starts to feel invisible, like his effort only matters when it's convenient for someone else, like his loyalty is expected, not appreciated. And the scariest part isn't that people take advantage of him, it's that he starts expecting it. That's when the good guy begins to question his worth, not in a dramatic way, quietly, internally. He wonders if he needs to be colder to be respected, louder to be noticed, less caring to be chosen. And even though he doesn't like those thoughts, they creep in anyway. But here's the truth he needs to hear. The world doesn't need more detached people pretending they don't care. It needs more people who choose kindness, even when it's inconvenient. More people who know how to love without manipulation. More people who stay solid when everything around them feels fake. The good guy isn't weak for feeling deeply. He's strong for not letting pain turn him into something he's not. And one day that integrity will matter more than all the times he was overlooked. At some point, the good guy has to learn a hard lesson. Being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Being loyal doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. And having a good heart doesn't mean you owe it to people who keep proving they don't know how to handle it. This is usually the stage where he starts choosing himself. Not in a selfish way, not in a bitter way, but in a quiet, self-respecting way. He stops chasing people who only reach out when it's convenient. He stops over-explaining his intentions. He stops proving that he's different. Because the truth is, the right people don't need convincing. The good guy learns that boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block love, they block misuse. And once he understands that, everything changes. He becomes more selective with his energy, more intentional with who gets access to him. He still cares deeply, but now it's earned. This is where his strength really shows. He doesn't become cruel, he doesn't become cold, he just becomes aware. He learns that love shouldn't feel like constantly waiting your turn, that effort shouldn't feel one-sided, that if someone truly values you, they won't make you question where you stand. And when he finally meets someone who matches his energy, who sees his kindness as safety instead of weakness, it clicks. All the waiting, all the hurt, all the doubt, it suddenly makes sense. Because the good guy wasn't wrong for being good, he was just giving his heart to the wrong people. There's a moment where the good guy finally realized something important. He was never meant to be understood by everyone. His way of loving was never designed for people who thrive on attention, chaos, or option. It was meant for someone who values depth, consistency, and intention. And once that clicks, he stops feeling ashamed of who he is. He understands now that not everyone deserves access to his softness, that some people only know how to take, not receive. And that doesn't make him naive, it makes him discerning. He doesn't need to change his heart, he just needs to protect it better. The good guy learns how to walk away without guilt, not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring about himself too. He learns that choosing peace over potential isn't giving up, it's growth. That silence is sometimes the loudest form of self-respect, and slowly something shifts. He speaks clearer, stops apologizing for having standards. He no longer wonders if being a good guy is worth it. He knows it is, because even if the world tried to harden him, it didn't succeed. He stayed true, and that integrity, that's something no one can take from him. One day, someone will meet him where he is. They won't question his intention, they won't test his loyalty, they won't confuse kindness for weakness. They'll recognize it immediately and they'll protect it the same way he does. Until then, the good guy keeps moving forward, not bitter, not broken, just wiser. And when that day comes, it won't feel dramatic. It won't feel like a movie moment where everything suddenly makes sense all at once. It'll feel calm, familiar, almost quiet, because the right person won't make the good guy question himself. They won't make him wonder if he's doing too much or not enough. They won't make him feel like he has to shrink his heart to be accepted. They'll meet him where he stands. They'll appreciate the way he listens, the way he shows up, the way he loves without keeping score. And for the first time, he won't feel like his kindness is a liability. It'll feel like a gift, something mutual, something protected, something finally returned. The good guy won't have to explain himself anymore. He won't have to prove that his intentions are real. He won't have to play it cool or pretend he doesn't care. He'll be allowed to be exactly who he is, and that'll be enough. Until then, the journey matters. Every disappointment taught him boundaries. Every heartbreak taught him discernment. Every moment of doubt sharpened his sense of self. He didn't lose those years being overlooked. He was being prepared to recognize real love when it shows up, prepared to walk away from anything that feels half-hearted, prepared to protect his heart without hardening. So if you're that good guy reading this, don't change. Don't let the world convince you that you need to become colder to survive. Stay solid, stay honest, stay kind. Just be selective with who gets that version of you. Because the world doesn't need fewer good guys. It needs people brave enough to stay good even when it's easier not to. What people never see is how much discipline it takes for the good guy to stay the way he is. Every bad experience tempts him to harden up. Every time he's overlooked, replaced, or taken for granted, there's a voice in his head telling him to stop caring so much, to move differently, to love less, to become like everyone else. But he doesn't. Not because it's easy, but because he knows who he is. He understands now that changing his character to fit a broken system would only cost him himself, and losing yourself just to be chosen by the wrong people is a price that's too high. So instead of becoming colder, he becomes more intentional. Instead of closing his heart, he narrows the door. He learns that being good doesn't mean being accessible to everyone. It means being principled. It means having the strength to say no, to walk away, to choose solitude over disrespect. And that kind of self-control, that's rare. The good guy also learns to forgive, not to excuse what hurt him, but to free himself from carrying resentment. He doesn't want bitterness living rent-free in his heart. He wants peace, growth, clarity, and forgiveness is part of that process. And one day, when someone finally meets him with the same depth, the same consistency, the same effort, he'll recognize it immediately. Not because it feels intense, but because it feels familiar. Until then, he keeps building, keeps healing, keeps choosing integrity over impulse, because the good guy isn't waiting to be saved. He's becoming someone worth meeting. In the end, the good guy doesn't get a dramatic apology from everyone who hurt him. He doesn't get closure from every situation that left scars. And he doesn't get a moment where the world suddenly admits it was wrong for overlooking him. What he gets is something quiet and far more powerful. He gets peace. Peace in knowing he never had to become someone else to survive. Peace in knowing his heart stayed intact even after everything. Peace in knowing he loved honestly in a world that often rewards the opposite. He looks back and realizes that every time he was ignored, every time he was treated like an option, every time he was underestimated, it wasn't a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of who couldn't meet him where he stood. And that understanding changes everything, because now he doesn't crave validation. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He knows who he is, and when love finally finds him, the kind that's mutual, intentional, and steady, it won't feel like winning. It'll feel like alignment, like finally being understood without having to explain yourself, like being valued without having to prove. Until then, the good guy keeps walking forward, not bitter, not resentful, not hard, just grounded, and that's the kind of strength no one can take